superhumans just popped up one day, each with a strange power only they could use. Some used it in normal jobs like cooking or art, and still ended up standing out far above everyone else. Other superhumans headed into the strange towers that rose inside cities, where monsters poured out of the dark. Those people became hunters, charging in to face the creatures the rest of the world feared. Lee Jin-woo once pushed himself to become one of those superhumans too. For years, his whole life was built around that single goal. Now, at 31, he had let that dream go and picked up a shovel instead. He chose to stay in the fields and live as a farmer. While he worked the field, the older couple called out, telling Jin-woo to take a break. He answered with an easy smile, acting like everything was fine. She handed him a drink and warned that working this hard would make him sick. Jin-woo thanked her but said he had to keep going so he could pay back the money he owed. The older man started grumbling that all this trouble came from becoming a guarantor for Chan-woo. His wife cut him off sharply, and Jin-woo stood there with his cup, stuck in the middle of their fight. His mother argued that Chan-woo had only been trying his best, but Jin-woo could not shake the knot in his chest. This was his little brother they were talking about. Back when Jin-woo left home to chase the superhuman dream, his younger brother Lee Chan-woo said he would support the family by doing business. He signed on as a guarantor for someone else, and that one paper stripped their family of most of their land. Jin-woo wrapped an arm around each of them and urged them to stop fighting. He reminded them that they had gotten new land with a no-interest loan, and that as long as they worked hard together, they would be fine. Jin-woo remembered how he ran, trained, and studied, swearing he would become a superhuman. In the end, he only came back with empty hands and shame. That failure was exactly why he now smiled under the straw hat and pushed himself to help his family stand again. Later, as the sky burned orange, Jin-woo checked his phone and did the math. With normal crops, there was no way they would make the kind of money they needed. He decided the only real path was growing rare, special crops. He thought about the strange plants that only grew inside dungeons, things that became miracle medicine or food fit for top hunters. People called them special crops and poured money into learning how to grow them. If he could raise even one of those, they would be rich, but the seeds cost a fortune and were hard to sprout, leaving him wondering if a trip to a special crop farm would even help. The more he thought about it, the heavier it felt, and a long sigh slipped out of him. Then a soft, unfamiliar sound brushed past his ears, snapping him out of his thoughts. His eyes widened as the sound shaped itself into a single word he knew all too well, making him wonder if his ears were playing tricks on him. He followed the sound and found a tiny sprout pushing out of the soil at his feet, and for a moment he could only stare, unsure if this was real. By the time the sky turned dark, Jin-woo headed back to the house, the strange little sprout now in his care. Inside, his mother told him to wash up and come eat, only to pause when she noticed the pot in his hands and gush over how cute the little sprout looked. Jin-woo forced a laugh, clutching the pot as the tiny plant quietly let out that same strange sound again. Out in the hall, Jin-woo stared down at the pot, sweat running down his cheek as he tried to figure out what this thing even was. The sprout answered only with more soft, baby-like sounds, as if it were trying to talk back. His mother tilted her head at the tiny plant, saying she could not tell anything just from a sprout, while it made another soft, baby-like sound only Jin-woo seemed to notice. Jin-woo blurted out in panic, asking his mother if she really could not hear what the sprout was saying. His mother stiffened and his father peeked in from the side, both asking what was going on and if he was really saying the sprout was talking. Jin-woo's father narrowed his eyes and called his son's name, his face turning gray. His father asked if he felt sick, and even offered to take him to the hospital, blaming himself for making Jin-woo work too hard after so long away from the fields, while the sprout let out another strange cry that no one else reacted to. Jin-woo's mouth hung open as he swallowed his protest, suddenly unsure how to explain any of this. His mother suddenly laughed, brushing it off as a bad joke and saying no sprout could talk, while Jin-woo forced a stiff smile and the little plant chirped again as if to argue. His father sighed that his son was being boring, told him to quit fooling around, wash up and eat, and Jin-woo could only nod and back down. The sink was piled high with dirty dishes, a dull reminder that life in the house was still the same, no matter what he had just heard. Later in his room, Jin-woo let out a long sigh and hugged the pot closer, half laughing as he asked the chirping sprout if it was trying to comfort him, quietly calling it wonderful for staying by his side. Jin-woo admitted that even though the sprout only made that same strange sound, he somehow understood every bit of it, and since no one else could hear it, he wondered if he was losing it or if this was something special. Then a slow grin spread across his face, as a wild thought hit him about this being some kind of special crop. The next day, clear blue skies hung over the quiet field and the cloth-covered sprout. Jin-woo hummed to himself as he soaked the covered pot with water, the sprout answering with a cheerful little cry. Hearing that extra excited tone, Jin-woo tilted his head and asked if something good had happened to it. Jin-woo happily told the sprout that the village head had sold their old fields back at the same price, letting his family reclaim most of their land, and he called the old man a truly kind person as the sprout chirped in agreement. Jin-woo went on, saying that was not even all the village head had done for them. The village head had also given him seeds for a special crop called Seed of Beauty. It was supposed to be almost impossible to grow, but if he could pull it off, it would be huge. That's when he noticed his own sprout had grown into a massive vine. He joked that it was getting fat and the plant seemed to call out his name in response. Staring at the giant stalk, Jin-woo suddenly realized he had no idea when he was supposed to harvest this thing or even what part of it he was meant to collect. A shout for Jin-woo came from outside the makeshift tent, snapping him out of his worries, and he quickly yelled back that he was on his way. Jin-woo scratched his head, told Hawa he would come back later, and pushed all the confusing harvest questions aside for now. Hearing that the truck had already arrived, Jin-woo shouted back that he was coming and hurried away, leaving the massive vine standing quietly by the tent. As soon as Jinwoo left, the thick stalk began to glow at its base, light spilling out across the soil. The glow swelled into a blinding wave of green light, the shape of something small and lively twisting inside it. Out on the road, a blue truck rolled up toward the fields. Just another workday delivery to anyone who did not know about the light behind the tent. One of the workers held a small device over a potato, and the screen calmly marked it as D-grade. By the stacked boxes, the village head listened as the buyer read out the numbers of D, C, and even B-grade potatoes, then thanked him warmly for paying such a good price. The buyer lowered his cap with a grin and said they were the thankful ones, since C-grade crops were hard to find and demand for them was huge. Watching the loaded truck rumble down the dirt road, the village head said it was amazing that someone could check a crop's rating that quickly. Later, while holding a folded tarp, Jinwoo asked the village head about those artifact tools and what kind of place a dungeon had to be to spit out materials for something that odd. Before Jinwoo can keep wondering about dungeons, the village head's wife cuts him off, barking at him to stop daydreaming and help sort the gear. Jinwoo shrinks under her glare, clutching the tarp like a kid caught slacking. The wife does not stop there and smacks her husband for adding to the nonsense, sending him stumbling with a yelp. Their fight is loud and silly, but it shows who really runs this farm. Once things calm down, Jinwoo suggests they celebrate with a barbecue since the sale went well, then asks how much they actually made. The wife quietly nudges her husband, pushing him to brag a little. The village head proudly shares that thanks to all the C-grade potatoes, they pulled in just over 8 million won this time. Jinwoo forces a smile and says it sounds like a really good deal as the sky burns orange behind him. As he walks the field alone, Jinwoo runs the numbers in his head and watches that big sum shrink once he counts fertilizer, tools, and every other cost. In the end, there is barely anything left, and he knows they need a real answer, not just another good harvest. Staring up at the glowing sky, the young farmer finally admits to himself where the real hope lies. The normal fields will never change his life, but something else might. His hand tightens in his pocket as he settles on the only answer he has, the special plant. With that choice made, Jinwoo strides to the tent, pulls the flap aside, and calls out to Hawa. From inside the tent, Hawa bursts into view, eyes shining and tiny hands reaching out like she has been waiting all day for him. Her bright smile makes the cramped tent feel like it is filled with sunlight. When the shock shout about a child rings out, Jinwoo can only scratch the back of his head, face twisted in panic. He has no idea how to explain that this tiny girl was a sprout just a short while ago. As an adult voice demands to know who this kid is, Jinwoo pulls Hawa in against his chest, trying to block her from the sudden pressure. The little spirit stiffens, her sprout-like hair twitching at the sharp tone, already sensing that her peaceful world might be getting a lot more complicated. Jinwoo clutches Hawa close, shouting her name as he stares at her tiny face, still trying to accept that the little sprout from his field has turned into a real, living girl. The young farmer stammers Hawa's name and tries to ask what she is, when a bright blue window flashes into view beside him with a sharp chime. His eyes widen as the system explains that he has grown the spirit of farming, turned his findings into a spirit, earned the retired pro-farmer's blessing, and is now being awakened as a spirit farmer. While Jinwoo reels at the title of spirit farmer, Hawa just laughs on the blanket, her whole body glowing with warm light, as if this strange new power feels completely natural to her. Night settles over the tiny tent, the moon hanging low while the new spirit farmer quietly takes in how much his life has just changed. Inside the tent, Lee Jinwoo sits in the dirt, hand over his mouth, reading the bright window that calls him a spirit farmer and lists strange farming skills instead of battle powers. He lets out a long sigh, thinking how this class has almost nothing to do with fighting and barely gives him any skills at all. Tiny hand suddenly grabs his arm, pulling him out of his gloomy thoughts. Jinwoo turns at her soft call, then smiles and tells Hawa he is not sick, gently asking if she was worrying about him as he reaches out to pat her head in thanks. Hawa closes her eyes and grins, melting under his hand, her whole body shaking with delight at the gentle praise. Watching her enjoy something so small, Jinwoo's lips curl into a quiet smile as he wonders if it really matters that his class has so few skills. He thinks about how he finally received the enlightenment he had chased for so many years, something he once thought he would never reach. On top of that, he now has Hawa, the cutest little spirit he could ever imagine, happily wobbling toward him with a bright smile. Jinwoo looks past Hawa's tiny sprout of hair to the glowing window again, realizing that even if this power is limited to farming, with her by his side it might be more than enough. Jinwoo stares at the glowing window over the tiny girl and realizes the system is calling her Hawa, testing the name on his tongue like he still cannot believe this cute kid is a real spirit. His gaze sharpens as Jinwoo starts wondering what kind of skills a farming spirit like her might have. The system throws up Hawa's status, and Jinwoo almost chokes when he sees tiny numbers for strength and speed, but endless immeasurable marks for magic, mind, and affinity, plus skills that let her talk to any spirit, call them over, and care for every crop like a master while happily eating anything he gives her. Jinwoo's eye twitches as he stares at the window, thinking how these skills feel more like something a monster boss would have, and trying to count how many times the word immeasurable shows up. Trying to calm down, Jinwoo bends to her level and asks if she really is a farming spirit, and Hawa throws her hand up with a bright shout, proudly agreeing like it is the coolest title in the world. When Jinwoo gently asks her to show what she is best at, Hawa taps her chin and mumbles in thought, clearly trying hard to pick the perfect way to prove herself. Without another word, the little spirit spins around and sprints across the field, leaving Jinwoo blinking after her and wondering what she is about to do. Hawa kneels by a lonely sprout and strokes its leaves with a happy chant, soft light and bubbles rising as she pours warm, gentle energy into the little plant. Jinwoo hurries over and watches the way Hawa calmly tends the sprout, realizing this must be her experienced farmer's hand and asking if this careful, loving touch is really the thing she is most proud of. Jinwoo forces a smile, scratching his cheek as he admits he cannot really tell what changed and wonders if she has anything a bit more flashy, something that shows her strength in one clear pop. Hawa plants her feet, puffs out her chest, and shouts her own name like a magic word, while Jinwoo just stares, not sure what she is trying to start. Out in a blank, dreamlike space, Hawa swings her arm and keeps chanting, and the tired farmer even copies her call, hoping this silly routine is actually part of some great skill. Their voices rise together, Hawa throwing her whole body into the shout as Jinwoo follows along, bracing himself for some huge shockwave. Back in the tent, the little spirit takes a deep breath and lets out one last drawn-out cry, and Jinwoo gulps, wondering what kind of move needs this much shouting. The ground suddenly erupts as a huge ring of force blasts out from Hawa, tossing dirt and wind in every direction and forcing Jinwoo to stagger back from the impact. Jinwoo stands frozen with his mouth half open, sweat running down his cheek as he tries to understand how that tiny girl just shook the whole field. The farmer glances around the quiet tent, mumbling that nothing really seems different, while Hawa trots back to him with a bright smile, as if she just finished a fun game. Hawa closes her eyes and smirks like a master who just showed a secret art. So Jinwoo forces a shaky grin, rubs her head, and tells her she did great, even while his mind races to figure out what that move was. Thinking it is over, Jinwoo scoops Hawa into his arms and steps outside, already stressing about how he is supposed to explain her to his parents, when the night sky twists and a roaring spiral of wind forms right above their tiny tent, leaving both of them staring up in shock. From inside the spinning clouds, a giant green spirit slowly leans out, its eyes fixed on the ground as it calmly asks who dared to summon it here. Jinwoo clutches Hawa and stares up, blurting her name as he finally connects that his tiny spirit girl is the reason this monster wind is here, while Hawa just waves at it like she found a new friend. High above them, the wind spirit hovers with her long green hair twisting through the air, her calm pose making the storm around her feel even more unreal. Down on the field, Jinwoo hugs Hawa close and stares up at the spinning sky, the wind walls towering so high that their whole farm looks like it could be blown away at any moment. The wind spirit's eyes narrow as green light pours off her body, and she calmly decides that this reckless summoning in such a small place is flat-out dangerous. Jinwoo nearly drops Hawa as he freaks out, demanding to know what that thing is, and shouting that she somehow called the strongest wind spirit just to show off. The wind spirit puffs up in anger at being called a mere thing, and Jinwoo bows his head at once, clutching Hawa and spilling out a rushed apology. Jinwoo sighs that he apologized without even thinking, while the wind spirit waves it off and coolly asks what kind of favor they dragged her out here for, leaving him and Hawa blinking in confusion. Still staring up at the giant spirit, Jinwoo calls Hawa's name again, hoping she actually had some smart request in mind instead of just dragging a god of wind into their backyard for fun. Hawa tilts her head and taps her lip, as if it is obvious, thinking that she was told to show what she could do, so she just called a spirit for no real reason at all. Jinwoo's eyes almost pop out as he yells Hawa's name, finally realizing that his overpowered spirit kid just dragged the strongest wind spirit into their quiet farm for absolutely nothing. The wind spirit leans down out of the roaring sky, her eye glowing bright, and asks if they seriously dragged her here for no real reason. Jinwoo hugs Hawa tight, feeling the pressure of the wind around them, and freaks out that the spirit is mad and begs his tiny spirit kid to fix this somehow. With the wind whipping past his face, Jinwoo's eyes light up as he suddenly remembers there actually is something huge he can ask the spirit to do. Clutching Hawa, the farmer points toward his land and begs the great wind spirit to help by working that whole field and getting the soil ready for planting. The wind spirit peers down at them, almost confused, and repeats his request, as if checking that all this trouble was just so she could work some dirt. The wind spirit relaxes, shrinks down to a gentler form, and says that if all they want is soil work, that kind of job is nothing for her. Jinwoo just stands there in a daze, trying to process that the strongest wind spirit in the world casually agreed to help him farm. Hovering over the long stretch of dirt while Hawa waves excitedly below, the wind spirit clears her throat like a show off about to start a grand performance. Flash, the bare field turns into neat, glowing rows of soft soil with not a single weed left, and Jinwoo can only stare and stammer his thanks. The wind spirit brushes it off as no big deal, tells him to at least plow it first next time, and then clutches her hands in horror over the tiny bit of dirt, even though he is sure she never actually touched the ground. The final spin of wind, the spirit says her piece and shoots back into the night sky, and Hawa waves both arms, calling out to her while Jinwoo just stands there, still holding his daughter's hand and taking in the perfectly fixed field. Jinwoo presses his lips together, listening to the quiet sky and half expecting some new disaster to crash down on his field. Then it hits him that the wind spirit really is gone, and Jinwoo almost yells with relief, grateful she left without wrecking anything else. Catching his breath, the farmer looks up at the dark sky and thinks that if Hawa can call a spirit strong enough to whip up typhoons, her power is on a whole different level. A shy smile creeps onto Jinwoo's face as he admits to himself that Hawa is an even more amazing spirit than he ever imagined, while the little girl just tilts her head, not understanding why he is suddenly so impressed. He squeezes Hawa's hand and suggests they call it a night, deciding to save the rest of her tricks for later because playing around with beings like that could easily cost lives. And as they turn to go, the system pops up to tell him his magic, mentality, and affinity have all jumped thanks to calming and calling such a great existence. As Jinwoo eyes the glowing window and wonders what his own skills even are now, Hawa tugs his hand and repeats his words in her clumsy way, turning the heavy night into something soft and a little silly. The crescent moon hangs over the quiet sky, as if the storm from earlier never happened. Down below, the family house glows softly, holding everyone safe and warm after the long, strange day. On the late-night news, the anchor reports an urgent story about a sudden typhoon in Hwisianggan, saying no one knows what caused it. Jinwoo's father listens with a deep frown as his son explains that he was enlightened and became a superhuman, and the old man can hardly process it. The farmer nods firmly, saying it is true, even though he still feels awkward calling himself a superhuman. Jinwoo explains that the little girl is actually a spirit named Hawa, and his father stares at her in disbelief, while Hawa just beams and waves like she is meeting new grandparents. When Jinwoo adds that the spirit Hawa called is the one that whipped up the huge typhoon, his father folds his arms with a stiff face while his mother hugs Hawa closer, torn between fear and how cute the child looks. The father's mouth hangs open as he tries to say something, his mind tripping over the thought that this tiny girl might have called a storm strong enough to wreck a town. Rubbing his forehead, the father listens as his wife gently suggests taking Jinwoo to a doctor she knows in Yupni, clearly thinking their son might need help. Jinwoo clutches his chest and pleads with his mother to trust him, and she forces a shaky smile and says she does, even though the whole thing sounds unreal. Jinwoo's mother strokes Hawa's head and says her parents must be worried, urging Jinwoo to take the child back to them, even pulling herself into the promise too. Jinwoo grabs his head and freaks out, thinking that if this keeps up, everyone will see him not just as unstable but as some kind of kidnapper. In the middle of that panic, Jinwoo suddenly remembers there is one way to clear up this huge misunderstanding. Trying to sound casual, Jinwoo says there is a way and asks his mother if she can give Hawa a bath before anything else. His mother agrees that Hawa is filthy from playing outside and warmly invites the girl to take a bath with her, while Hawa kicks and throws her arms up in pure joy. While his wife leads Hawa toward the bathroom, Jinwoo's father folds his arms and admits he knows just how badly his son always wanted to become a superhuman. His father pushes back, saying that no matter the reason, taking a child like this is crossing a line, and Jinwoo lowers his head, sweating as he pleads for just a bit more trust. Moments later, Jinwoo's mother bursts back into the room with a towel wrapped Hawa, shouting for her husband and son as she stares at the child in alarm, demanding to know what is going on. After taking a look, Jinwoo's father jolts back in shock, shouting that Hawa's body does not even have the usual parts a human child should have. Hearing his father shout, Jinwoo lets out a long breath and smiles weakly, relieved that they finally understand Hawa is not an ordinary girl he dragged home. Jinwoo wipes his sweat and calmly repeats that this is what he tried to tell them before, that Hawa is actually a spirit, not a normal child. His mother hugs the laughing girl tighter, repeating Hawa's name as she asks in disbelief if this cheerful child in her arms is really some kind of spirit. A week drifts by under clear country skies, and Jinwoo goes back to tending the fields, admitting to himself that even now he still knows very little about Hawa, beyond what the status window keeps insisting that she is a spirit. As he straightens his aching back and gulps from a bottle, the farmer keeps turning it over in his head, a spirit that does not demand any price from its summoner, something he has never even heard of, just like this so-called spirit farmer job he somehow ended up with. He glances down at the tiny spirit beside him and calls out to Hawa, half joking and half worried that there still might be some unseen price tied to her powers. Hawa pays no mind to his worries and just chomps into a hot potato pancake, eyes shining with simple joy. Out in the field, Jinwoo plants his hands on his hips and calls out to Hawa, trying to pull the little spirit away from her snacks for a moment. Hawa looks up with her cheeks puffed full of food and chirps back at him in her own happy gibberish. Hawa tears into the potato pancakes like a tiny eating machine, stuffing one after another into her mouth until the plate is bare. And Jinwoo can only think that with an appetite like this she would crush any eating contest, but at least she works hard enough on the farm to make it feel fair. In his mind, Jinwoo can almost see Hawa sitting on a throne of empty plates as the grand food king, and he laughs weakly to himself, amazed at how quickly she cleared every last potato pancake. One of Hawa's little plant spirits shoots across the field, looking oddly fierce for something so round and cute. A tiny water spirit drifts through the falling rain while fiery spirits dance beside it, each one ready to handle its own part of the fieldwork. All around the cornfield, spirits of fire, water, earth, and plants zip between the rows while Jinwoo just stands at the edge, watching his field almost run itself. Jinwoo scratches his cheek with a sheepish smile, thinking how Hawa's spirits have already handled the hard parts, and that his own skill only really covered the rest. In his mind, Hawa throws up her arms with a bright grin as the spirits pop into the air around her, showing how easily she can call them out. Then he pictures himself stepping in after her, pointing like a coach while the same spirits rush off at his orders to handle the farm chores. When Hawa tries to boss them around again after handing them over, the little water spirit just tilts its head in confusion, no longer reacting to her at all. Side by side, Jinwoo and Hawa look like one strange but perfect team, the kind of pair that can cover every job on the farm without missing a beat. Jinwoo lets out a soft sigh, a little annoyed that such a broken combo is stuck doing nothing but farm work. He stares up at the wide blue sky, wondering how far they could go if their spirits were allowed to do more than just grow crops. He remembers the last time he called a real monster of a spirit, towering over him with wild eyes. Jinwoo had just stood there, stiff as a board, wondering why on earth he ever thought this was a good idea. Jinwoo shudders and decides he is never calling something like that again, no matter how good the skill boost is. As his heart finally slows down, he realizes Hawa is tugging at him. Hawa clutches her stomach, looking a bit guilty as it growls again. She reminds him that she already finished all the food, but somehow she is still hungry. Jinwoo grabs her cheeks and stretches them with a half-crazy smile, asking how all that food vanished into such a tiny body. He still cannot wrap his head around how a spirit can eat like this. When he mentions they will stop by Wonju and get her even better food, Hawa's eyes sparkle like fireworks. The promise of snacks wipes out every trace of her worry. Hawa skips in circles, arms flapping, already dreaming of all the food in the city. Jinwoo laughs and says that if she is that happy, they should hurry up and finish the field. With her hat pulled low and boots stomping, Hawa marches toward the little plot marked with her name, treating it like her own tiny kingdom. She stretches on her toes to pat a tall stalk, humming as if she is saying hello. To Hawa, every plant in this field feels like a friend she has to check on. From the edge of the rows, Jinwoo watches her move slowly down the line, brushing every stalk with her small hand. It hits him that she might be saying a quiet farewell to each one. A soft smile spreads under his hat as he looks at her. He is sure that with a spirit who loves them that much, these crops are going to grow better than anything the world has ever seen. Hawa throws her arm up and laughs, glowing with pride in her field and buzzing for the trip to town. They step into Wonju hand in hand, Hawa craning her neck at the tall buildings, while Jinwoo laughs at how everything here feels huge to her. Hawa leans back so far to stare at the sky that her whole body tilts, and Jinwoo jokes that if she keeps that up her neck might just snap backward. Inside the Superhuman Association building, a staff member called out that Lee Jinwoo's registration was finally complete, turning his old dream into something real at last. At the counter, Jinwoo reached out with both hands to take the card, answering the receptionist a bit awkwardly while Hawa stared up at him from the chair, sensing something important was happening. Jinwoo's eyes widened as he stared down at the card, like his brain was still trying to catch up to the fact that he had actually done it. In his hands lay a fresh superhuman license, listing his name, his qualifier ID, and the strange but proud title of Spirit Farmer, proof that he now stood among real superhumans, even if his job was farming. A tear gathered at the edge of Jinwoo's eye as his smile fought to stay small, because after all those wasted years and failures, he was now officially a superhuman. Hawa tilted her head on the chair, puzzled by why Jinwoo was just staring at that card and getting teary instead of moving on like he promised. Snapping out of it, Jinwoo proudly waved the license in front of Hawa, telling her how he had chased this little card for years and that he had finally grabbed it. Hawa jumped to her feet, cheering her own name and stretching a hand toward the strange platform, already sure that Jinwoo's new power meant more fun tricks with spirits. Her small hand hovered over the golden rings and blue cube, but the device stayed quiet, ignoring her eager call. Jinwoo scratched his cheek and lightly teased that maybe the thing only worked for proper superhumans, then picked Hawa up from behind and told her they should get going, while she sagged in his hands, mumbling sadly. Jinwoo's grin stretched from ear to ear, relieved that Hawa's mood had flipped the moment food was on the table. When Jinwoo lightly suggested they could just go home and rest instead of eating out, Hawa snapped her head up, horrified that he might cancel their feast. The little spirit shoved off his chest and launched herself forward, as if moving right now was the only way to protect their trip. Hawa took off at a full sprint, tiny legs pumping, while Jinwoo just stood there with his hands on his hips, letting her drag the pace of the day. By the time he looked up, Hawa was already at the revolving door, flailing her arms, so Jinwoo raised his hands in defeat and hurriedly told her he had only been joking. Inside the lobby, a red-haired man and a silver-haired woman were already in each other's faces, yelling about who should or shouldn't take the trials, while the poor receptionist begged them to calm down. Baek Chin-soo, the branch manager of the Wonju Superhuman Association, strode in with his hands in his pockets, brushing off talk about last year's results as he was welcomed by the staff. The branch manager frowned at the racket echoing through the hall, and the receptionist, sweating a little, admitted that the noise was just those two loud regulars going at it again over the trials. Two sets of shoes clicked across the polished floor toward each other, the light steps carrying a weight that promised this next talk would not be gentle. One of the hunters stiffened as Baek Chin-soo walked up, forcing a polite greeting out like he had totally not been yelling a minute ago. The branch manager calmly reminded Jung Hyuk and Soo Jin that they were the face of Gangwon-do's superhumans, and were supposed to be the ones others looked up to. Jeong Soo Jin and Park Jung Hyuk burst out in protest, but the tags under their names made it clear these two hotheads were actually top superhuman hunters. Baek Chin-soo leaned in with a forced smile that felt more like a threat, making it very clear they were not to fight and demanding that they answer him properly. The two hunters shrank into chibi versions of themselves and immediately started blaming each other for the scolding, while the manager watched them like a tired parent. Baek Chin-soo sighed, thinking how that couple did great work but never stopped arguing, while the two of them casually headed out, already talking about grabbing a meal. A staff member hurried over with a tablet, telling the branch manager the latest list of new superhumans was ready, and he agreed to go check it in his office. A simple sign marked the entrance to the branch manager's office, a quieter space away from the noisy lobby. Settling into his chair, Baek Chin-soo rested the tablet on the desk and began scrolling through the list of fresh superhumans. As he read, the manager's relaxed look faded, his grip tightening on the tablet when one of the new entries stood out as anything but ordinary. The branch manager pulled his hand back from the tablet and let out a long, tired breath. Baek Chin-soo slumped back in his chair, grumbling that there were no real talents and that he would have to raise a world-class superhuman himself. His fingers dug into the armrest as he imagined that if he pulled it off, he would not stay a branch manager and might even reach the association president's seat. He scanned the tablet, asking himself if there was anyone born with real talent, and his eyes stopped on two names: Kim Ha-nul, a spiritist, and Lee Jin-woo, whose bizarre title of spirit farmer made him pause. Far away under a calm night sky, warm light spilled from Jin-woo's house out in the countryside. Inside, Hawa tried on one outfit after another, each one somehow making her even cuter, while Jin-woo's parents gushed over her and even talked about turning their little farming spirit into a future celebrity. His mother urged Jin-woo to hurry up and show the new clothes to his dad, and he replied from the side that he just needed another second to finish what he was doing. Jin-woo snapped, yelling back when his father brushed off the word dad, and joked that having a daughter already meant Jin-woo's chances at marriage were gone. A moment later, Jin-woo sat on the floor with teary eyes, cutting away at some paper and grumbling that he had just entered his 30s and still had plenty of chances, before finally saying it was done. Later that night, Jin-woo waved Hawa over with a grin, and the little spirit tilted her head in confusion as she answered his call. Jin-woo called Hawa over, and the little farming spirit ran toward him with an eager smile, wondering what he wanted. Inside the living room, Jin-woo told Hawa to hold out her hand and gently placed a small card-shaped gift on her palm, while she stared at him in confusion. The card in her hands showed a tiny picture of Hawa with the words Spirit License, marking her as the spirit of farming just like a real superhuman. Jin-woo scratched his cheek with an awkward smile, admitting it was a bit rough but saying he made it because he knew Hawa also wanted a license of her own. Hawa's eye widened, a tiny tear forming as she took in how much care he had put into the simple card. Then the little spirit exploded with joy, leaping up and waving the license high as she shouted his name with all the happiness in her tiny body. Jin-woo blinked in surprise, not expecting her to be this thrilled over something he had thrown together himself. Hawa bounced around on the couch, proudly showing off her license, and Jin-woo watched with a soft smile, asking if she really liked it that much. As he laughed, a thought popped into Jin-woo's head, and he suddenly remembered there was something else he wanted to share with her. Hawa turned from the kitchen, clutching her new card, as Jin-woo called her to come sit with him so they could look at it together, and so he could show off the official superhuman license he had chased for so many years. Jin-woo pulls Hawa close, holds up his phone, and snaps a photo of them proudly showing off their licenses, treating it like a big family milestone. Hawa stretches out the card and laughs, telling Jin-woo that they match now like a proper set. Staring at the spirit of farming written under her name, Hawa beams so hard it looks like her tiny chest might burst with pride. Jin-woo rests his hand on her head, watching her giggle over the license and quietly thanking her for being here with him. With a calm smile, Jin-woo thinks about how empty his days were before Hawa came into his life, and quietly feels that she saved him more than he saved her. From inside the lit farmhouse, his father grumbles that any photo needs everyone in it, and Jin-woo hurriedly agrees, flustered but secretly pleased. A moment later, they crowd together for another shot, Hawa cheering in front while Jin-woo and his parents grin behind her, turning the simple license into a memory for all of them. Hawa stretches her arms as high as she can toward the towering corn, her little body shaking with effort as she tries to help like a real farmer. Jin-woo swallows hard as he watches her struggle, proud that she wants to help but scared she might push herself too far. The tiny farming spirit drags over a crate and climbs on top of it, her boots wobbling as she fights for just a little more height. Her small fingers finally close around a fat ear of corn, and she yanks it free with all the strength she has. Hawa presses the huge corn against her cheek and beams, and Jin-woo quickly snaps a picture, joking that today they are real corn farmers. The spirit farmer scrolls through the shot with a soft grin, teasing that this spirit girl is so pretty he almost wonders which lucky fool managed to form a contract with her. His mother leans in, squealing over how cute Hawa looks and demanding he send the picture so she can set it as her wallpaper again, while Jin-woo laughs and reminds her she has already swapped it out a dozen times this week. Her father marches over and snaps that if even little Hawa is out there working, the two of them have no excuse to stand around playing with their phones. Jin-woo and his mother hurry toward the corn rows, mumbling that they were only taking a short break as they rush to grab crates before their father can lecture them again. As he hurries off, Jin-woo hears his father call his name from behind and turns with a start, wondering what new task is coming next. The old farmer glares at them, barking even louder, making it clear break time is over for real. While Jin-woo and his mother trade playful jabs about who should be scolding who, Hawa calmly lifts another glowing ear of corn, making them pause and call out to her. The tiny farming spirit lets out a small huff, clutching the heavy corn but refusing to slow down. Soon a whole tarp is covered in ears, each one plump and clean, and the family marvels that every single stalk seems healthy. Looking over the pile, Jin-woo's father grins and says that once they test it, this batch should all come out at C rank or higher. Jin-woo lifts one cob and frowns in surprise, feeling that this one is clearly above the C-grade corn he is used to. His eyes sharpen as his blessing flares, telling him this ear is on a different level. The old farmer starts walking off, saying he will grab the crop rank tester so they can see the numbers for real. Jin-woo clutches the cob and quickly begs his father to wait, a cold sweat running down his cheek as a bright blue window forms in front of him. The system calmly stamps the ear as B rank, praising how the late hard work raised its score and how great its texture and sweetness are, so Jin-woo mutters that there is no need to borrow any tester now. His parents take a break under the clear sky, laughing that having a superhuman in the family is pretty nice now that they do not need to rent that pricey tester anymore. Jin-woo forces a smile and admits it is nice to save money, though something about this setup still bugs him. Still clutching an armful of corn, the farmer finally snaps and protests that he is the only one actually working, while the others have nothing to do. As tiny spirits cheerfully fly corn into the B-grade pile, his father reminds him that only Jinwoo can judge the ranks and the spirits do the heavy lifting. Admitting he never thought much would change, but his son has turned out to be a huge help, which only makes Jinwoo grumble that they are being unfair. Jinwoo's eyes drift away from the floating spirits as he suddenly realizes Hawa has gone quiet and starts to wonder where she slipped off to. A tiny body strains against a bulging sack that scrapes across the dirt, the load clearly far too heavy for someone that small. Hawa marches forward with her cheeks puffed out, dragging the massive bag behind her as if she refuses to be the only one not helping. Her face turns bright red and scrunches up, showing how hard she is pushing herself just to move that stubborn bag a little farther. Jinwoo's eyes go wide as he finally notices her tiny body fighting with the sack, and he cries out Hawa's name in shock. He dashes over and snatches the sack out of her hands, scolding Hawa for trying to haul something that heavy on her own instead of asking him for help. The farmer softens right away, rubbing Hawa's burning cheeks and joking that her cute face has turned bright red from trying so hard. With a grin, Jinwoo asks if they should check the corn she grew, and Hawa jumps up with both arms raised, eager to see her own harvest judged. When he appraises the basket, the system praises it as corn raised with deep love from the spirit of farming, noting that even with a rough start, the texture and sweetness have both reached perfect levels, leaving Jinwoo stunned. An enormous A+ mark shines over the corn, and both the farmer and the little spirit yell in disbelief, unable to process that her very first crop is already top tier. He remembers how, after dungeons appeared, people made special artifacts to grade crops, and how warehouses usually only saw piles of D and C grade boxes with just a couple of B grades mixed in, which buyers already paid good money for. He thinks about how you can barely tell the grades apart by eye, yet a single B-rated ear can sell for 10 times more than a C-rated one, turning a small bump in quality into a mountain of cash. Back in his kitchen, Jinwoo mutters to himself that if B-grade already sells like that, the few A-grade crops in the world must go for truly crazy prices. Staring at the steam, the farmer quietly wonders just how much a single A-rated ear like his would be worth on the open market. As the golden ears roll in the boiling water, he gulps and wonders if he is really about to just cook something that might be worth a fortune. His lips part as he finally makes up his mind about what to do with the miracle corn. The rich smell of the corn hits Jinwoo, and all his careful plans vanish as he just stands there drooling like crazy. Hawa tugs on Jinwoo's leg, begging for a taste, but the farmer reminds her that good food is meant to be shared, asking her to wait until everyone is gathered. The little spirit looks up with wide eyes, clearly torn, her small hands balled as she fights the urge to rush the pot. Jinwoo rests his hand on Hawa's head and praises her, and she presses against his side, trying hard to be the good girl he believes she is. Even his parents hover nearby with mouths watering, the whole family silently staring toward the kitchen like they might charge at any second. At last they give up on acting calm and shout for Jinwoo to bring it out already, with Hawa bouncing along and backing them up. Smiling like he has been waiting for this too, Jinwoo steps out with a huge tray of steaming corn and tells them it is time to dig in. On the tray, the ears of corn shine like gold bars, each kernel plump and bright enough to make anyone forget how much it might be worth. The whole family leans in, drooling openly as they praise how amazing it looks and smells, and Jinwoo laughs that keeping his hands off while it boiled was the hardest part of the day. They all chomp into their cobs at the same time, and Hawa's eyes pop as the sweetness hits her, proving in one bite that this corn is on a whole different level. The first bite hits them like a shockwave, and everyone freezes mid-chew, eyes wide, as if they just tasted pure magic instead of corn. Jinwoo just stares at the cob in disbelief while Hawa clutches hers and laughs, already sure this is the best thing she has ever eaten. His parents keep chewing and blurt out that this makes no sense, since they did not even add salt or butter, while Jinwoo and Hawa just keep eating, too busy enjoying the rich, savory taste to stop. Soon the cobs in their hands are bare, and the four of them stand around awkwardly, each waiting for someone else to be the first to suggest another round. The sack that had been stuffed with shining cobs now lies flat on the ground, completely picked clean. Out in the yard, Jinwoo lifts the empty bag with a weak smile, thinking about how they lost control and wiped out half of the precious A+ batch in one meal. Inside, Hawa lies spread out on the floor with a round belly and a pleased puff of breath, so full and happy that Jinwoo cannot really regret losing that much corn. As the food coma settles over the house, Jinwoo's gaze sharpens, because this harvest is not just tasty, it hides something far bigger. The system calmly lays it out. One batch of A+ corn gives a short boost to magic, while another raises a person's magic by 1 point forever, turning simple ears into priceless treasures. Jinwoo clutches the husks to his chest, half thrilled and half scared, knowing that while temporary buff crops already exist out there, this permanent magic corn could flip the whole hunter market on its head. Jinwoo stares at the glowing ears in his hand, knowing that if corn that can raise skills forever ever hits the market, the whole hunter world will flip upside down. He pictures Hawa laughing without a care and realizes that if people learn she grew this miracle crop, greedy hunters might come after her. Under the stars, Jinwoo decides the answer is simple. He will keep the secret and just eat every last cob himself, even if it means chewing them raw. The farmer chomps into the raw A+ corn and almost jumps from how sweet and rich it is even uncooked. As he keeps chewing, a familiar blue window pops up, and he wonders if this is the notice that his skills just went up. While he enjoys his snack by the stall, the cow complains that it wants to eat corn too, and the words land in his head as clear as human speech. Jinwoo hugs the cob closer and snaps back that there is no way he is handing such a crazy expensive crop over. And the cow grumbles that he is stingy, and he understands every word. Jinwoo freezes, corn still in hand. The system calmly informs him that by eating the best crop of his harvest, he has uncovered the retired pro farmer's hidden piece and gained a new skill called livestock's voices. Out in the countryside, old-style market days still run strong. In Hwisung, stalls open whenever the date ends in 1 or 6, which means 5 busy days every month, and today is one of those days. They haul out the last sack of corn, piling it beside the boxes at their stall. Jinwoo tells Hwang to handle the selling and prices, while Hwa rubs her sleepy eyes and calls out to him. As they step away from the stall, Jinwoo looks around, surprised by how packed the market is. He remembers that a big superhuman auction is being held today, so people have flooded in from everywhere. A sudden blast of noise rips through the air, and Hwa jumps, eyes wide and hands clenched at her chest. Hwa bolts straight into Jinwoo's chest, wrapping herself around him, and he catches her with an awkward smile, patting her back to calm her down. He rests a gentle hand on her head and explains that the rumble is not a storm. And Hwa looks up at him with damp eyes, trying to steady her breathing. Jinwoo keeps her close and explains that today is also the Superhuman Representative Trials, a huge contest for battle-type superhumans, which is why the crowd ahead is roaring so loudly. On the arena floor, 2 superhumans charge at each other, blue energy bursting from their hands as they push their skills to the limit. The fighters hurl streaks of power across the arena while the stands erupt, because the SRT is where battle types show off their skills and fight to prove who stands on top. Watching the flashes in the distance, Jinwoo quietly admits he once wanted to stand in arenas like that too, then shakes it off as Hwa grabs his hand and pulls him into the market, shouting for him to hurry. Hwa puffs out her tiny chest and says she wants to see the match, acting proud of herself for being brave now. Jinwoo leads Hwa toward the noise, but all they find is a wall of people, with the real fight hidden somewhere beyond the shouting crowd. Hearing Hwa call him cool makes Jinwoo blush a little, and as he glances at the tall adults around him, a simple solution pops into his head. The farmer grins, and treating Hwa like a tiny commander, asks if his brave boss wants a special seat to watch the contest properly. Hwa yells back without a hint of fear, ordering him to go ahead, her whole face lit up with excitement. With a quick swing, Jinwoo lifts Hwa up and settles her on his shoulders, standing tall like he is showing off his most precious treasure. High above the crowd now, Hwa points toward the flashing arena, and Jinwoo laughs, asking if his little queen can see everything clearly from up there. While the rest of the crowd pushes and shouts, Jinwoo just stands there with Hwa on his shoulders, letting her wave and cheer as she soaks in the sight. Looking past the heads in front of him to the crackling arena, Jinwoo thinks about how he trained for years yet never once stood on a stage like that. Then he feels Hwa's tiny hands gripping his head as she laughs and reaches for the sky, and he realizes that giving up that dream was worth it, because now he has someone far more important to carry on his shoulders. The farmer turns his eyes toward the city tower, quietly hoping the corn Hwa grew sells out at the market today. Inside the Hwasung Superhuman auction, well-dressed agents and hunters move through the hall, all here to buy anything that can give them an edge. A red-haired fighter strolls beside his partner and asks if there is anything here worth his time. He explains that he needs something he can use right away, since the Superhuman Representative Trials are just around the corner. His gaze lingers on rare potions, but he reminds himself that weapons, drugs, and even these occulter-made brews are banned for the trials. The fighter rubs his chin, picturing a smug silver-haired woman he clearly wants to beat, and decides he needs some kind of boost before he faces her in the trial. He thinks about special potatoes that raise strength for a few minutes, knowing even a single level can decide a fight and that crop still slip past the drug rules. As he dwells on it, a silver-haired woman suddenly leans in behind him, guessing right away that he has been searching for those potatoes, and he jumps in shock. The red-haired fighter snaps at her for creeping up on him like that, clearly rattled, while the silver-haired woman just laughs and pokes fun at how he could not even sense her, saying it is no wonder he is clinging to a crop for help. She cheerfully says that if potatoes like that ever show up, she plans to buy every last one, and he grumbles that someone that desperate has no right to tease him, knowing full well how rare those products are. Buzz runs through the auction hall as people at the front start shouting and pointing, and the red-haired fighter turns with his silver-haired rival, wondering if someone has just brought out the kind of crop they were dreaming about. People in the hall rush to call reporters and their bosses, yelling that something huge just showed up at Hwisung and demanding money to grab it fast. The red-haired fighter yells, asking if some legendary drink that raises every stat just popped up, and the silver-haired woman snaps back that something that crazy would be sold in a far bigger place than this. The fighter rubs the back of his head, admitting she has a point, while his rival mutters under her breath about what kind of husband jumps to wild ideas like that. On the table, rows of bright yellow corn shine like treasure, and the fighter squints, trying to understand why simple corn is causing such a stir. The fighter stares at the sparkling ears, thinking they do look tasty, but he cannot see why a bunch of grown adults are losing their minds over corn. He reads the boards and learns that the A+ corn is not only insanely tasty, but that one type raises magic by 5 levels for an hour, with bags going for tens of thousands of dollars, and his mind almost shuts down at the numbers. In his head, the proud A+ corn boots a sad little B+ potato off the stage, and he finally gets it. From now on, this magic corn, not his beloved potatoes, will rule every battle prep in the SRT. Before he can move, his silver-haired rival blurts out in shock about the magic corn, and he turns toward her, sweat running down his cheek as he senses trouble. The silver-haired woman bolts toward the stall with her phone raised, shouting that she will take both sets of magic boosting corn, and the red-haired fighter howls behind her, stunned that she is really snatching everything for herself. As the sun sinks over the quiet town, a distant voice bursts out in disbelief. Unable to process what was just bought at that tiny market, Jinwoo almost drops his phone when he hears that every single magic boosting corn is gone, and that people paid a fortune for them. The two-star superhumans clutch their bulging sacks of corn like trophies, each racing ahead and bragging that this time they are the one who will win. Outside the shop, Jinwoo listens as the caller brings up reporters and wonders if he will go public as the grower, and he answers lightly that it is not a big deal. With Hawa blinking up at him, Jinwoo decides that even if he could handle the attention alone, he will stay hidden because he just wants a calm life on the farm and promises the caller he will wait for news of the rest selling. Jinwoo smiles to himself, locking in one clear promise in his heart that nothing in this world is allowed to touch Hawa. A moment later, the farmer bends down and happily tells Hawa that the corn she helped grow is selling like crazy. He announces they should celebrate with a big barbecue, and Hawa bursts into a wide-mouthed grin, throwing her hands up while he ruffles her hair. As Hawa hops around chanting his name, Jinwoo points a finger and laughs, asking if a simple barbecue really makes her this thrilled, while little images of meat float behind them. Under the glowing sunset, Hawa twirls and sings about the barbecue, and Jinwoo stands with his hands on his hips, half amazed that she can be this happy over grilled meat. Watching her dance, Jinwoo leans forward with a sly smile, already thinking that since the corn was a hit, it is time to plan the next crop. The village officer hands Jinwoo a small item and tells him it is only so he can learn what special crops are like, warning him to treat it as practice and stay away from the real thing from now on. Jinwoo opens his hand and sees a pouch as the system explains that the village head has given him a seed of beauty, a special wildflower from dungeons, and he realizes this simple gift is another rare crop. In his mind, the simple seed turns into towering blue vines, each one heavy with glowing berries that scream rare and valuable. People who had given up on ever seeing hair again used this dungeon plant and woke up with thick, shiny locks, and that one change shook the whole world. Because this miracle turned baldness into a joke, its seeds and growing method were locked behind vault doors and black suits, with almost no real info leaking out to normal people. Back on the field, Jinwoo calls Hawa over, already sure that the two of them are anything but normal farmers when it comes to special crops. He kneels in the soft soil and tells Hawa he is just going to test this one seed, as if planting a world-changing crop is no big deal. He drops the tiny beauty seed into the groove and smooths the dirt over it with slow, careful pats, sealing a secret worth more than gold under plain farm soil. They both lean in toward the little mound, and Jinwoo gently asks if she feels it waking up, hoping her strange sense will give him an early answer. Hawa rocks side to side like a tiny sage and gives her verdict, and Jinwoo just laughs, amused at how hard she is pretending to be an expert. He stands up and stretches, half joking that maybe this seed really will not do anything, and Hawa quickly calls out, not ready to give up on it yet. Hawa throws her head back with a loud, proud laugh, and Jinwoo can only sweat and stare, realizing that if she believes this hard, the beauty seed might really sprout after all. Jinwoo watches Hawa shout with wild energy and thinks it is crazy that this tiny girl, who is actually stronger than him, is just playing farmer here. He reminds himself that she even knows the real method to raise beauty, which makes their little act feel even more unreal. Out in the field, Jinwoo checks the glowing window and admits there is one big problem he cannot ignore. The system explains that the seed of beauty is a rare wildflower from special plant dungeons that only sprouts when the remains of something called a prime mango react to a unique poison, and that it will grow even without much care. Jinwoo pictures the prime mango as a massive fanged beast towering over him, and remembers that it is a man-eating monster that also carries poison in its body. He lets out a tired sigh and wonders what he is supposed to do now, thinking he might have to keep raising normal crops while he figures out some way to handle this. Right then, the system flares brighter and announces a new challenge from the retired pro farmer, telling him that by choosing to grow this new crop, he has taken his first step toward being a true hunter and farmer, with a goal set as sprouting the seed of beauty and a special gift promised if he succeeds. Jinwoo stares at the message, rubbing his chin, and wonders why something like this suddenly popped up out of nowhere. It feels to Jinwoo like the retired pro farmer is flat out telling him to put all his attention on raising beauty right now. So he calls Hawa over to look at the window with him. He quickly makes up his mind, lifts Hawa into his arms, and asks if she wants to go on a trip with him to tackle this beauty challenge together, using her playful title as he grins up at her. Jinwoo decides they will start a full trip across the country the very next day to find what they need for beauty, and Hawa throws her arms wide, thrilled at the promise of an adventure. A TV special starts to cover the crazy buzz shaking the whole world, and the host strides onto the bright set, greeting the viewers with a big smile. The MC, Yunu, explains that they paused their usual show for a special episode and proudly introduces himself to the audience. Yunu sweeps his arm toward the display table, hyping up that today's show will center on a single, very special item. The camera lingers on the glittering A+ corns, then Yunu runs through the guest list. A famed French gourmet called Jan Moore, the calm critic Professor Han, and a powerhouse superhuman couple, Jiangsu Jin of Ice Line Guild and Park Jung Hyuk of Fired. With the critics seated, Yunu turns toward a figure off to the side and tells everyone that the most important guest of all is about to be introduced. The final guest steps forward, a young superhuman chef named Jiangsu Chan, who will be the one trusted to cook the A+ corns for everyone. Jiangsu Chan smiles to himself in the studio kitchen, saying he has waited a long time for this, and is thrilled to finally cook with a plus corns today. His easy smile fades into a sharp gaze as a familiar blue window flickers into view, hinting that this cooking job comes with strings attached. The system announces his 11th challenge to become a true chef. Raise the taste of the A+ corns all the way to their built-in limit using only basic cooking, with a gift promised if he succeeds and a sharp scolding if he fails, and the warning that trying to push past the corn's own maximum could even cost him his life, which leaves him feeling oddly attacked. The harsh wording drags him back to memories of the great chef who trained him, a man who always said he still had a long way to go. And Jiangsu Chan clenches his jaw, stung that even after years as a superhuman, that teacher has never once truly acknowledged him. Jiangsu Chan clenches his fist, annoyed that his teacher and even the system still treat him like a rookie, and he decides he will prove them wrong here. The host turns to Jiangsu Chan and asks how he plans to handle the A+ corns, and the young chef answers calmly that he is ready. The chef lifts his fist to his chest and vows to show the skills that even his so-called maximum chef teacher forgot, promising to stick strictly to the basics. When the host gives the signal to begin, Jiangsu Chan laughs, folds his arms with easy confidence, and answers that he will start right away. The foreign gourmet leans back with a pleased smile, saying that Su Chan's cooking is always the best, while the strict professor beside him listens without showing much emotion. Back in the kitchen, the chef leans over the cutting board and moves his knife with sharp, steady strokes, his face set in full focus as the others admire his work. At the counter, the icy woman and fiery man are asked which of them cooks better, and without hesitation the pair insist that the title clearly belongs to them. The fire hunter snaps that the ice hunter cannot even measure water for noodles, and she shoots back that he cannot fry an egg, while the flustered host stands between them, begging them to stop fighting. Hearing the silly argument behind him, the chef presses his lips into a thin smile, clearly annoyed but forcing himself to stay calm and keep cooking. A microwave on the counter swings open, and a blinding light pours out from inside, hinting that whatever Su Chan is heating up is anything but normal. The smell hits them so hard that the host and both judges blank out for a moment, then snap back, embarrassed that their minds just drifted away from the show. The host jumps up from his seat, shouting in shock as he realizes this insane smell can only be coming from Chef Su Chan's dish. Chef Su Chan sets down a bubbling gratin packed with A+ corns and calmly tells them it is ready to eat while it is still hot. The host groans that it is a shame the viewers cannot smell this, since even they are drooling over it, and Su Chan just smiles, saying it is only natural for food he made. The foreign gourmet happily praises the dish as expected from Chef Jiang, while the professor admits it is quite good, and Su Chan thinks this level should even earn him respect from his old maximum chef teacher. Then the fire hunter ruins the happy mood by calmly saying the gratin actually tastes bad. The fire hunter quickly corrects himself, saying it is not exactly awful but that he once ate this A+ corn raw and it was on a whole different level. And the ice hunter apologetically admits she felt the same, even if she cannot explain why. The host stares at them, sweating, trying to wrap his head around the idea that simple raw corn could taste better than this carefully made gratin. Su Chan's hand curls into a tight fist, and the two judges glance at him with worried faces as they feel his pride as a chef start to crack. Unable to hold it in, the chef rushes up to the two hunters and demands to know if his treasured A+ corn gratin is truly less tasty than just eating the corn raw. Both hunters lean in and fire back without fear, saying the plain A+ corn really did taste better than his proud gratin. Chef Jiang's eye goes wide as the system announces that he has failed his 11th challenge, and that the forgotten maximum chef is raging at him. The forgotten maximum chef roars at his disciple, raging that he treated the A+ corn like a joke and ignored the simple basics the recipe demanded. The patron even talks about coming down in person to check, while below Su Chan stumbles back, stunned that a gratin more delicious than anything he has ever made still counts as a failure. The chef stands frozen on stage, sweat running down his face as it sinks in that the challenge has truly been marked as a failure. New system window appears, giving him one last chance from the forgotten maximum chef. Cook the A+ corns exactly by the patron's recipe or lose all the skills he gained. The chef stares at the warning in silence until the worried host leans in and asks if he is all right. Su Chan glares down at the untouched gratin, then tightens his jaw and turns from it, ready to toss aside his pride and make something new from scratch. The chef straightens his back, clenches his fists, and tells everyone that the gratin was a failure, promising to show them what a true A+ corn dish should be. The host wipes at the sweat on his cheek and carefully calls out to Chef Jiang, unsure what kind of dish is about to appear. On the counter, the replacement dish sits on a plain white plate, 4 shining A+ corn cobs, simply steamed and still giving off hot clouds of steam. The host stares at the plate in disbelief, stammering as he asks if the chef really just steamed the corn and nothing else. The judges tear into the steamed corn like starving men, sweat running down their faces as they realize how insanely good it is. The host leans over the counter, begging the judges to at least say something, but they just keep chewing like they have never tasted food before. One judge pulls his mouth from the cob, a bit of corn stuck to his cheek as he sucks in a breath to yell. The red-haired judge throws his head back and roars that the corn is unbelievably tasty, swearing without thinking as golden light seems to burst around them. And that one raw reaction later turns the A+ corn into a legend. Chef Jiangsu Chan stands alone in the spotlight, stunned that a plate of plain steamed corn just shook the whole show. Some time later, a bright red bus rolls down a country road, carrying everyone away from the wild TV taping. On the bus, Hawa waves a donut in the air with both hands, chanting happily as Jinwoo leans on his armrest and just smiles at how excited she is. Jinwoo closes his eyes with a small, satisfied smirk, enjoying the calm ride and having no idea what his corn has started back in the city. Back at the station, the poor producer hunches over his desk, grinding through a mountain of apology letters about the swearing on live TV while muttering that at least the viewer ratings were amazing. The butcher's stall, Jinwoo tried to explain what kind of meat he wanted, while Hawa happily chewed on a steaming chunk and pictured one of their horned dungeon beasts. The butcher just sweated, wondering what kind of family needed that much meat. Weeks after their trip, they hit a pork rice soup place, and Hawa tore through bowl after bowl until they formed a little wall beside her. The server stared in shock while Jinwoo laughed weakly, acting like this was totally normal. After all the eating and traveling, they finally rolled back into their quiet country home, the fields and low walls waiting under a clear blue sky. Jinwoo stretched in his fresh shirt and said that going all the way to Busan to hunt down that famous mango had seemed harmless enough. Now he stood in front of a mountain of horned dungeon beasts, tiny compared to the pile, wondering how on earth they had ended up buying this many. Out in the yard, Jinwoo's father stared at the heap of beasts and demanded to know what all this was, while Jinwoo just flashed a bright, too proud smile. To the farmer, the snarling pile behind him was simple. Every single one of those beasts was pure money. When his father stepped closer to check them out, Jinwoo panicked and yelled for him to stop, blurting that these things were poisonous, which made the old man jerk back in alarm. His father exploded, furious that Jinwoo had dumped something so dangerous right in the middle of their field. Jinwoo hurried to explain that he needed them as fertilizer for growing the rare beauty crop and promised he would move them to the garden soon, insisting this was exactly what he had planned. The old man let out a strained sigh, admitting that if special plants needed things like this, then Jinwoo's new farming really was on a whole different, very weird level. Jinwoo forced a bright smile and hurried to say he had bought the horned beasts as cheaply as he could, trying to sound like a careful superhuman farmer instead of a reckless spender. His father narrowed his eyes, and under that heavy stare, Jinwoo blurted that the seller had even thrown in free delivery, as if that somehow made the mountain of monsters okay. The old farmer let out a long, tired breath, finally saying that since his son was the awakened one now, he would trust him to handle it properly. Jinwoo froze, staring wide-eyed as the words sank in, not sure he had heard his father right. His father gave a small, proud smile, clapped a hand on Jinwoo's shoulder, and said that since his son was doing more than him now, he should act as head of the house and just ask if he ever needed. With his hands in his pockets, the older man headed back toward the house, leaving Jinwoo standing in the yard with the beasts and a brand new weight on his shoulders. Jinwoo straightened up, promised himself he would not let his father down, then yelled for Hawa, knowing there was no way he could haul all those horned bodies alone. From the cowshed, Hawa came sprinting with her arms spread wide, leaving a calm cow behind as she ran to him at full speed. She skidded to a stop in front of Jinwoo, and he bent down with a strained smile, calling her name again like a worried dad who had finally found his runaway kid. Jinwoo reached out to ruffle her hair, half scolding her for spending all her time with the cows since that talking with livestock skill showed up, while Hawa just closed her eyes and soaked up the praise like a happy puppy. Jinwoo tells Hawa it is fine to play with the cows, but warns her to be careful since they are way bigger than her. Then he calmly asks her to call the wind spirit so they can haul the bodies. Hawa snaps a salute and blasts up into the sky, racing to bring that power down over the quiet fields. One of the horned dungeon beasts lies stretched out on the wooden floor, tongue hanging out and body completely still, ready to be turned into farming material instead of a threat. Masked and covered in long red gloves, Jinwoo asks if they should begin, while Hawa answers with bright energy at his side. The tiny wind spirits hover around them, ready to keep any poison from drifting their way as they work over the beast. Jinwoo asks the wind spirits to keep any poisonous gas away from him and Hawa, and the little green balls wobble in the air, clearly nervous but ready to help. Even with the fumes curling around the spikes, Jinwoo reaches out, thinking about how they only know beauty needs prime mangoes and that the rest will have to be pure trial and error. Soon the beast is covered in a thick mound of soil, its black spikes jutting out as Jinwoo follows the first idea and buries the prime mango's corpse together with a beauty seed. For the next try, he turns another prime mango into a thick, dark blend in a red basin, planning to drop a beauty seed straight into the strange slurry. Jinwoo pinches the tiny beauty seed between his gloved fingers, studying it for a second as he decides where this last test should go. He lays the seed softly on the beast's spotted hide, letting it sink into the fur as if he is planting it in the monster itself. The whole purple body lies stretched across the wooden floor, and on its back sits the tiny beauty seed, placed exactly where Jinwoo wants it on top of the prime mango's corpse, ready to show which method will work. Jinwoo turns to Hawa with a hopeful look, saying this last idea might also be the answer they need. The farmer stares down at the buried seed and begs it in his heart to grow strong. After a moment, he straightens up, deciding they have done everything possible for now. He tugs his mask down, tells Hawa it is time to pack up, and calls her to follow him home. Out in the fresh air, Jinwoo stretches his arms and cheerfully tells Hawa they earned a barbecue party for working so hard. Hawa throws her hand up and bounces with joy, already thrilled just thinking about eating meat with him. Night settles over the small farmhouse, the sky full of stars as the long day finally winds down. Thick slices of meat and sausage sizzle on the hot grill, filling the air with a rich, smoky smell. Jinwoo wraps meat, rice, and garlic in a fresh leaf and offers it to her, and Hawa happily grabs the huge bundle with both hands, ready to stuff it into her mouth. She shoves the whole wrap into her mouth with both hands, and soon Hawa is sprawled on the floor, cheeks full and eyes closed, floating in simple, glowing happiness. Hawa keeps stuffing her cheeks, and the older couple laugh that she would probably even try to eat rocks at this rate. Jinwoo steps in and gently tells her that rocks are off the menu. Grinning, Jinwoo asks what she would do if there were rocks that tasted even better than meat. Hawa freezes, honestly shaken by the thought. Back at the grill, Jinwoo notices Hawa still frowning in deep thought about the rock problem and asks if she is really taking that seriously. She just stares at him, stuck on the idea. Then the system window flashes into view, telling Jinwoo he has cleared the challenge. As a reward from the retired pro farmer, he is granted a special dungeon farmland for spirit farmers that will appear right where he just proved himself. Jinwoo stares at the message, stunned that his reward is not money or items but an actual dungeon. He turns to Hawa, calling her name as unease hits him. Hawa jumps at his sudden shout, eyes wide and mouth open, not understanding why he is so worked up. She rushes over and points at the grill, saying she only jumped because he scared her and the food is burning. Jinwoo follows her finger and realizes the barbecue is in trouble. From outside, the calm farmhouse suddenly fills with their shouts, as they yell about the food burning on the grill. The next day, Jinwoo walks the fields with Hawa humming at his side, still mulling over the system message. He is glad to be getting a reward, but he cannot understand why it had to be a dungeon. Jinwoo lets out a long sigh, remembering that every dungeon in the country is owned by the government, so this one will not truly belong to him either. He even admits he cannot just sneak in, grab some hidden artifact, and pretend it never existed. Jinwoo reaches the field where the dungeon should be and slows down, confused that everything looks completely normal. He looks around in shock, seeing no government teams and not even a trace of the praying mango bodies that covered the place yesterday. He mutters Hawa's name, then corrects himself and wonders out loud where the dungeon even went, making the little spirit girl glance up in confusion. Hawa's eyes suddenly sharpen, as if she just felt something strange calling from the field. The farming spirit suddenly takes off at a full sprint toward the furrows, calling his name in excitement, while Jinwoo rushes after her, yelling for her to stop. Right in the middle of the tilled rows, a bright oval gate of light blooms into the air, humming with soft, colorful sparks. Jinwoo freezes for heartbeat as he spots the glowing gate and Hawa racing toward it. Then panic hits him all at once. Without slowing down, the farmer throws himself straight into the shining gate, letting the light swallow him as he chases after Hawa. The system calmly announces that he has entered Dungeon Farmland Level 1, a place meant only for spirit farmers. Instead of a smooth landing, the portal hurls Jinwoo out high above the field, his body spinning as his straw hat tears free and drops after him. Jinwoo stares down in shock, only now grasping how high up he still is. They land on their feet in the middle of neat, empty furrows and Jinwoo looks around, stunned that this bare patch of dirt is the dungeon farmland while Hawa happily calls out his name. From high above, Jinwoo sees that the entire dungeon is just a single floating island of fields, and he admits to himself he has never heard of anything like this before. The farmer crouches by the furrows, spotting tiny praying mango sprouts in the dozing beast, and he wonders how all of his plants ended up growing here as if the whole field was copied. Tiny fairy-like spirit leans close to Jinwoo's ear and gently greets him, her playful voice sending a chill down his spine. The farmer jerks around, sweating and yelling in fright, desperate to see what just spoke right behind him. Bright fairy with long hair and glowing wings rises over the furrows, cheerfully apologizing for the scare as Hawa jumps up toward her, and Jinwoo shields the child on instinct. The dungeon fairy glides closer through the golden light, arms spread wide as she gives them a bright, formal welcome. Beaming from ear to ear, the fairy proudly announces that they have arrived at Dungeon Farmland. The dungeon fairy starts to introduce herself with all the pride in the world, but Jinwoo tilts his head and wonders out loud if she is just some kind of bug, leaving her frozen in midair and the two below staring in shock. Her lips tremble and a tear hangs at the edge of her cheek as the fairy tries, and fails, to keep her feelings together. The fairy finally snaps, wailing to the sky about being called a bug and demanding to know why she has to look like one, while Jinwoo and Hawa can only stare up at her in alarm. Jinwoo and Hawa both shout up to her at once, trying to snap the crying fairy out of her wild panic before she flies off the handle even more. The farmer leans toward the tiny spirit with both hands out, sweating as he babbles an excuse about her size and admits he was wrong to call her a bug. His rough farmer's hand settles softly on her head, and the little spirit stiffens in surprise at the sudden, gentle touch. Hawa steps up on tiptoe and adds her own tiny hand to the fairy's head, copying Jinwoo's gesture and turning the awkward moment into warm, clumsy comfort. When she calms down, the dungeon spirit thanks them, then shyly asks the little girl's name and Hawa beams as she tells her. Hearing it, the fairy repeats how pretty it sounds, but as she admits she does not even have a name of her own, her bright red eyes start to shine with fresh tears. The moment she remembers that she once had a name and somehow forgot it, the fairy breaks down all over again, wailing while Jinwoo and Hawa wave their hands in a flustered mess. Not long after, her cries fade, and high above the clouds the small island of Dungeon Farmland just drifts in the sky as she apologizes for losing control like that. The dungeon fairy straightens up, puts a hand on her chest, and proudly introduces herself as the guardian of this floating farmland, warmly welcoming the spirit farmer to his new domain. Jinwoo answers the greeting while Hawa throws both hands up and proudly yells her own name, and the grateful fairy thanks them before saying she will show them how this strange dungeon farm actually works. Using a rough little drawing of the floating island, the fairy brags about how amazing this place is, admitting she still has no name but insisting her skills as its manager are top-notch. The tiny guide flits around the picture and explains that this dungeon farm works nothing like the usual ones, asking about their past dungeon trips, and Jinwoo can only sweat and admit he has never stepped into any before. With a bright grin, the fairy raises a finger and says that while there are all kinds of dungeons in the world, This one leaves every other type in the dust. Above her head, a goofy drawing of the island suddenly bulks up with huge arms as the fairy proudly reveals the secret. This is an evolving dungeon, a place that can actually grow. Jinwoo stares at her with a giant question mark hanging between them, trying to wrap his head around a dungeon that grows, and the fairy just laughs softly and says she will spell it out for them. She whips out another crayon-style picture, this time of a grinning farmer in a headband, and cheerfully points out how much the little drawing looks like Jinwoo. The farmer gives a weak smile and admits the doodle does resemble him, while Hawa bounces beside him, shouting her name like she is cheering for the goofy picture. In her last sketch, the tiny farmer and the island both flex with matching level-up marks, as the fairy explains that this dungeon grows side by side with Jinwoo, changing shape and strength to match the way he himself develops. The fairy leans in with sparkling eyes and tells Jinwoo that every part of this strange dungeon already belongs to him, asking if he is excited about owning it all. Hawa claps like this is the best show ever, while Jinwoo forces out a shaky agreement, still trying to process that this whole floating farm might really be his. The farmer rubs the back of his head and points out that every dungeon in the country is supposed to belong to the government, but the fairy just laughs it off and tells him that problem is already taken care of. Instead of explaining more, the fairy shoves a big rolled sheet into Jinwoo's hands, leaving him blinking at it in confusion. When he unrolls it, the sheet shows the fairy drawn like a tiny warrior, holding a spear and shield as if she is guarding something important. The fairy strikes a proud pose beside the poster and explains that this mighty guard is actually her, bragging that even this cool drawing cannot show how strong and pretty she really is, leaving Jinwoo honestly impressed and Hawa cheering her on. With a sharp salute, the fairy explains that while she stands guard, no one can even locate this dungeon, much less enter it, unless Jinwoo allows it, and the farmer feels a chill as he starts to grasp how huge that is. Staring out over the endless neat fields under the clear sky, Jinwoo slowly repeats the thought in his head, realizing this whole secret dungeon farm is actually his to control. The fairy zips right up to his face and with a teasing grin asks what he thinks now that he knows this whole place is his. Hearing her ask if he likes it, Jinwoo breaks into a wide, shaky smile and admits he loves it, and the fairy beams pleased that her new master is finally on board. The dungeon fairy shoots ahead through the air, calling for them to follow her this way. Hawa runs after her with a huge smile, reaching out like she is trying to tag her new friend. Hawa finally manages to grab the fairy, and the little guardian laughs, saying she has been caught and will be the chaser now. Watching them from the roof, Jinwoo realizes this is the first time Hawa has ever played with someone her own age. As the two girls chase each other around, Jinwoo thinks about how hard it is for a strange child like Hawa to make normal friends, and he feels honestly relieved seeing her find one here. Jinwoo eyes the cliff like edge with worry, but his hand presses against a firm, clear wall, and he relaxes a bit knowing they cannot fall off. Before he can step back, Hawa comes flying at him full speed, shouting for the fairy and making Jinwoo flinch in shock. Hawa crashes into his chest like a tiny battering ram, driving Jinwoo backward toward the glowing wall. Hawa beams up at him, clearly pleased to have dragged him into the game, while the farmer forces a smile and asks her to go a little easier on his ribs. She keeps dragging him along at full speed, and Jinwoo, already out of breath, begs her to slow down. Jinwoo starts to warn that Hawa is way too fast for this, and even the dungeon fairy hovers nearby with a nervous smile, worried that the little spirit's wild hugs might send him flying for real. The little fairy flutters in front of them, bowing and saying she just got carried away, while Hawa repeats the stiff way she keeps calling her master. The guardian fairy lowers her head and explains that she is being punished, so she is not allowed to speak casually to the spirit farmer. Jinwoo lets out an awkward laugh, tells her his full name, and quietly wonders what kind of trouble this tiny fairy is caught up in as she calls his name cool. The fairy admits that as part of her punishment she does not even have a name right now, saying it like it is something she has just gotten used to. Hearing that, Jinwoo suddenly brightens and asks if he can give her a stand-in name, making both Hawa and the fairy stare at him in surprise. The farmer thinks for a moment, then grins and suggests calling her Elle for now, clearly pleased with his own idea. Hawa throws her hands up, shouting the new name with pure joy, while Jinwoo points at the tiny guardian and says it suits a fairy like her perfectly, asking what she thinks. The fairy's bright red eyes widen as the name Elle sinks in, like something deep inside her has just been touched. A huge smile spreads across the tiny guardian's face as she repeats Elle to herself, and gushes that it is a beautiful name. Light explodes from the tiny body as the system declares that the dungeon's nameless fairy has become the dungeon's spirit Elle, and is now bound as a recruit, while Jinwoo feels his magic drop by 5 points in payment. Hawa bounces on Jinwoo's shoulder, shouting Elle's new name with pure pride as the glowing spirit drifts down from the sky toward them. Elle's tiny foot touches the ground with a soft step, like she is claiming the dungeon as her own for the first time. With a bright smile, Elle speaks up and proudly calls herself the spirit of this dungeon, embracing the name she just received. The dungeon spirit throws her arms wide, laughing as she promises to look after them from now on, fully joining their little farm family. She introduced herself as Elle, the spirit of the dungeon, and said that from now on she would be in their care. The new dungeon farmland hung in the sky like a broken piece of earth, cut free from the ground and left floating among the clouds. Jinwoo studied the blue stem rising from the soil, realizing it had swallowed the prime mango completely, and that the seed he had set on top was growing better than all the others. He grabbed the thick blue stem and gave it a shake, frowning as it wobbled more than he liked, and deciding he would need to build something to hold it up. Staring up at the towering blue vines loaded with glossy fruit, the farmer admitted to himself that he still knew almost nothing about beauty, and even doubted if it was supposed to get this. Jinwoo flipped through the guide and saw it claim beauty should only reach about a meter. Yet in just a week it had already grown taller than he was. Elle sat on Jinwoo's shoulder and calmly pointed out that beauty had grown even faster since she began tending it every day, making him scratch his cheek and apologize for giving her extra work. The dungeon spirit lowered her head, saying it was only natural for her to help, and softly adding that watching over beauty had even been a bit enjoyable as her small hand curled around Jinwoo's. Jinwoo gave her a gentle smile and thanked her, saying beauty had grown this well thanks to her care, and the simple praise left the dungeon spirit staring back at him with her cheeks burning. Flustered by his thanks, Elle suddenly shot off toward Hawa, hiding her face in her hands as she rushed to the little spirit for cover, leaving Jinwoo standing there in surprise. Watching Elle cling to Hawa, Jinwoo only smiled, quietly glad that the shy dungeon spirit was already fitting into their little family. Jinwoo watched the two spirits, thinking Elle was still a bit stiff around them but clearly a good person, as Hawa bounced up and eagerly asked her to play tag. The system laid out Elle's details, showing solid stats and naming her the dungeon manager of the spirit farmer's farmland, able to borrow some of Jinwoo's strength yet bound by a punishment that stripped her real name and locked her inside the dungeon. Looking up at the wide, empty sky, Jinwoo thought about how harsh it was to be trapped in such a bare dungeon, even if it was meant as punishment. He remembered asking her about it, and Elle had hurried to say it was fine, insisting that the dungeon farmland was quiet and peaceful. Even though she claimed she was okay, Jinwoo rubbed the back of his neck, unable to stop thinking that being locked away like that had to hurt. Down below, Hawa suddenly pounced on Elle with a giggle, tagging her, and boldly declaring that the dungeon spirit would be the one chasing this round. Hawa dashed off across the field, and Elle flapped after her, clutching at Jinwoo's leg and pleading for the little spirit to wait up. With a grin, Jinwoo suddenly leaped at both of them, announcing that he was it now, and the two spirits shrieked with laughter as he reached for them with wiggling hands. For now, Jinwoo and the spirits just soaked in that simple happiness, unaware that far away, a new dungeon gate had opened, and hunters were already gathering in front of its dark mouth. Among the crowd, seasoned hunters tightened their grips on heavy weapons, eyes shining at the thought of the loot and fame waiting inside the fresh gate. The red-haired hunter grinned, saying the dungeon's spot was not just fine but perfect, since it sat in easy-to-reach Hwisung and was only ranked E. The two hunters stopped in front of the dark gate, staring into the swirling space without saying a word. The red-haired hunter suggested that their guild should be the one to manage this dungeon, but the white-haired hunter laughed lightly and reminded him that, as Gangwondo's main guild, they already held priority here. When he complained that using their special right on an E rank was a waste, and they should save it for something better, the white-haired hunter brushed him off, saying chances like this did not appear every day. She coolly added that he should have just won the last competition if he wanted better options, and the red-haired hunter flared up, shouting in outrage at the low blow. Their argument died at once when a stern man in a suit stepped up, clearing his throat so sharply that both hunters stiffened and shivered. The manager smiled warmly and joked that the two hunters always made a great pair, while the staff member beside him looked like she could not believe he was saying that with a straight face. The white-haired hunter laughed and lightly nudged her partner, warning him not to get on the manager's bad side before asking why someone that important would bother coming out for a simple E-rank gate. The manager's smile faded a bit as he answered that calling it only an E-rank missed the point, since the gate sat in a prime spot. He went on to say that if the dungeon held horned rabbits, the kind people called a gold mine, then of course the association had to step in, and the white-haired hunter froze, stunned by what that meant. The red-haired hunter snapped, demanding to know why the solo farmer was not getting first pick on the dungeon when it was clearly his find. The manager calmly reminded him that the world did not bend to their wishes, but the red-haired hunter still argued that handing this dungeon over felt wrong, while the white-haired hunter watched, unsure if this was turning into a real fight. The white-haired hunter just smiled, and pointed out that he had been the one trying to snatch the dungeon away a moment ago. She reminded him that he had shown his greed the moment he tried to claim the gate without bringing a single guild member, adding that he was way too honest to pull off a lie like that. With that settled, the white-haired hunter told her team she would go negotiate with the manager, ordering them to deal with any horned rabbits that popped out and to make sure no other guilds stole their gains. As she happily walked off with the red-haired hunter, the staff whispered that she really should not leave her post right now, but decided to ignore it, reminding themselves that only the guild with priority was allowed to clear the dungeon itself. That rule only covered what happened inside the dungeon. Once monsters burst out of the gate like these horned rabbits, they became fair game for any hunter nearby. Hunters without dungeon rights rushed in, cheering that it was time to work, since everyone knew the Hwisung gate spat out horned rabbits that charged at anything instead of running away, making them easy targets. Out in the fields, packs of horned rabbits bounded across the ground while hunters pounded after them, barely needing any effort to keep up. Each little beast carried a single horn that sold for a shocking price in medicine and alchemy, so weak or not, they were the perfect target, and the reason so many hunters had gathered in Hwisung. To most hunters, a horned rabbit sprinting their way is just easy money on legs. In the bushes nearby, something small bursts out, racing across the path like it knows exactly how much it is worth. But these two horned rabbits are the odd ones out, trotting side by side instead of charging at the nearest hunter. Their eyes are sharp, and they move with a strange purpose, almost like they are on their own mission. One of the rabbits kicks off the ground with a powerful leap, not toward prey but straight away from the chaos. It pours all its strength into running, like it refuses to be someone's loot today. Together, the pair tears down the empty path, leaving the hunters and the wild chase far behind. Their tiny bodies streak forward, driven by a shared urge to get as far from that war as possible. They burst out of the trees into open countryside, paws drumming over soft grass under a bright blue sky. Out here, with only mountains and trees around them, the hunt feels like a bad dream they finally outran. Even in the quiet fields, the rabbits do not slow down, ears pinned back as they sprint. Their faces are set with stubborn focus, as if they already picked a safe place and will not stop until they reach it. Their mad dash finally guides them toward a lonely tree and a worn farm path, right on the edge of Jinwoo's land. Without knowing it, they are trading one kind of danger for a very different kind of life. Hawa and Elle lean forward with wide eyes, spotting the exhausted rabbits stumbling into their yard. Hawa calls out to them in her bright, childish way, eager for new game. A moment later, the two little troublemakers latch onto Jinwoo, shaking his shoulders like maracas. They urge him not to quit yet while he sways in place, already looking like the game has drained his soul. Jinwoo stares ahead with blank eyes, sweat pouring down as his stomach churns. He remembers a little too late that the stamina of young kids is a whole different monster, and chasing them around might actually finish him before any dungeon ever does. Jinwoo looks up at the spirits drifting around him and gives a small nod, pleased with how well they handled the work. The vines stretch down the rows, thick and shining with life, and even the little plant spirit bounces happily between them. The farmer beams at the crowd of tiny spirits, telling them the sweet potatoes look great and that they all did an amazing job today. Staring over the endless green rows, Jinwoo wonders if keeping this pace means he can raise his farm's rank and turn this place into something huge. His eyes go wide and he whirls around, heart jumping as Hawa's panicked voice cuts through his thoughts. Jinwoo bolts down the path toward Hawa's little plot, shouting for her as dread builds in his chest. Hawa turns toward him with wet eyes, then grabs his sleeve and points ahead, begging him to look at what happened. Hawa's neat rows are broken, with fat sweet potatoes torn open and half-eaten right out of the soil. Jinwoo lifts a gnawed sweet potato and frowns, muttering that some wild animal must have broken in, then glances down, knowing how crushed Hawa must feel. The little girl presses her face into Jinwoo's chest and mumbles his name, holding on tight as the loss of her sweet potatoes finally sinks in. Jinwoo thinks back to how a stray cat once wrecked the garden he loved as a kid, then gently pats Hawa's shoulder, trying to ease the sting he knows too well. In his memory, young Jinwoo stands in his ruined plot, bawling as he clutches broken leaves, remembering how that small disaster felt like his whole world falling apart. Back in the field, Jinwoo hugs Hawa and tells her that plenty of sweet potatoes survived, promising they'll grow the rest even better and that he'll set up nets to protect her garden. Jinwoo's smile fades as a sharp rustle from the bushes makes him flinch, every nerve suddenly on edge. The farmer quickly pulls Hawa behind him, warning her to step back as he wonders if the wild animal that ruined the field is still lurking nearby. Jaw tight, Jinwoo glares toward the bushes, bracing himself to deal with whatever is about to jump out. A small white creature with a stubby horn shoots out of the bushes in a wild leap, landing right in front of them. The horned rabbit plants its feet and squeaks a sharp warning not to come closer, making Jinwoo jolt at the sudden show of courage. Seeing it up close, Jinwoo realizes this is no normal rabbit but a dungeon monster, and his mind races over why something like that would show up on his quiet farm. Studying the broken stump on its forehead, the farmer is sure it's a horned rabbit he once saw in a monster guidebook, and that detail matters more to him now than the chewed sweet potatoes. The horned rabbit yells at them to stay back, and Jinwoo freezes as he realizes he somehow understands every word, even though it is a dungeon monster. His mind jumps back to a day in the barn when a cow begged to taste his precious corn, and the younger farmer snapped back that there was no way he would waste something that valuable. Back in the field, he understands that the same skill that lets him hear livestock is now picking up the horned rabbit's angry voice, which means the system sees this monster as possible farm stock. Bright window pops up, laying out a new challenge to become a true farmer by taking in the ownerless horned rabbit family as livestock, hinting that they are in trouble and dangling a special gift if he succeeds. Jinwoo glares at the floating window and snaps that this is not some harmless rabbit but a dungeon monster, making both Hawa and the horned rabbit twitch at his outburst. Jaw tight, the farmer decides he has to turn this challenge down, thinking that dealing with monsters is far too risky and that he will never let Hawa get hurt over some quest reward. With his mind made up, Jinwoo tells Hawa they are backing away and gently steers her behind him, planning to put some distance between his little girl and the horned rabbit. Hawa clings to his sleeve and with wide, worried eyes, lets him know she wants to help the horned rabbits instead of running from them. The farmer hesitates, asking what the rabbits even need from them and thinking that, even if they wanted to help, getting mixed up with dungeon monsters could still be a huge mistake. Ahead of them, one horned rabbit plants itself in a guarding stance, while another lies collapsed in the dirt behind it, making it clear that this little family really is in trouble. Jinwoo leans in to check the rabbit behind the bush and realizes the swollen belly means she is pregnant, but the horned rabbit in front snaps at him in panic, warning him to stay away. The farmer holds his hands up, saying he only wants to help, and points out that the rabbit behind it is struggling so badly that both she and her babies might not make it if no one steps in. Jinwoo promises he will not lay a hand on the mother if they refuse, and then turns to Hawa and the horned rabbit, telling them that the choice to trust him is theirs. The horned rabbit trembles, torn between its fear of humans and the pain of watching its mate suffer. Looks back at the farmer and the little girl, searching their faces for any hint of trickery and finding only worry. After a long breath, the horned rabbit forces out a shaky answer. The guardian drops its head to the dirt in a deep bow, telling the farmer it will trust him with the mother and the unborn babies. Hearing that, Jinwoo squares his shoulders, tells them he will handle it, and rushes toward the suffering rabbit with Hawa anxiously trailing him. The sun sinks low over the fields, showing that the fight to save the mother rabbit drags on into the evening. Later, Hawa beams and calls out to Jinwoo, her wide smile making it clear that things turned out okay. The horned rabbit mother lay on her side at last, eyes soft as a line of tiny kits wriggled and drank. Hawa watched from the edge of the pen, completely glued to the sight. Jinwoo chuckled and told Hawa that the babies might be fun to watch, but the mother needed peace too. Hawa nodded hard, promising with her whole face that she would behave. With Hawa calmed down, the farmer's smile faded a little as he thought back to what had gone wrong. There had been a clear reason the birth had turned into such a struggle. He had found that one of the babies hadn't made it and was stuck inside, blocking the way for the rest. For a farmer, it was a sadly common problem, but it still hit him hard. So he called over a small fire spirit and calmly asked it to take care of the tiny body. The glowing flame bobbed in the air as if agreeing to the task. The fire spirit flared up, burning bright for a moment as it carried out the quiet farewell. Jinwoo could only hope the little one would find a kinder start somewhere else. Later, as the fire faded, the father horned rabbit hopped up to Jinwoo's side, ears twitching. Its small sound carried a mix of relief and thanks. The little guardian lifted its head, eyes wet, and told the farmer it was truly grateful. It said it wanted to repay what he had done somehow. Jinwoo blinked at that, not sure what kind of payback a rabbit could even mean. His voice came out half curious, half worried as he asked what it was talking about. Instead of answering with words, the horned rabbit suddenly flopped down in front of him, almost like it was offering itself. Jinwoo just stood there, eyes wide, trying to figure out what kind of favor this was supposed to be. The father horned rabbit freaked out and shouted that Jinwoo should just eat him, as if throwing his whole body in as payment. Jinwoo whipped his head toward Hawa, almost asking if she was hearing this, while the rabbit called out in worry, unsure what was wrong with its offer. Hawa laughed it off and pointed out that the babies had just been born, and even the tired father rabbit had to admit that letting himself be eaten now would be insane. Jinwoo eyed the horned rabbit, still a bit nervous about keeping a dungeon monster on the farm, but the fact that they could talk made it feel less dangerous than he first thought. The poor rabbit just lay there, sweating and mumbling, stuck on how else it could ever repay him. The farmer crouched down with a gentle smile and said he did not want the rabbit's life at all. Instead, he asked if the father would stay on the farm and live with them. The horned rabbit tilted its head, ears drooping as it tried to understand how simply staying by their side could ever count as paying back such a huge favor. After checking if that was really enough to settle what it owed, the father rabbit finally brightened and agreed to do as Jinwoo asked, while the farmer just nodded, happy with the answer. Their hands met in a small, awkward shake, turning a simple promise into a real bond, and somewhere beyond the fields, the patron quietly marked this new family as part of the growing dungeon farmland. Not long after, Jinwoo rushed over with an armful of horned rabbits, shouting for Hawa to stop dangling one of the babies upside down, while she just stared up at him, confused about what she had done wrong. Watching his child flail in Hawa's tiny hands, the father horned rabbit broke into a cold sweat and wondered if agreeing to stay on this farm had really been the right choice. With the baby horned rabbits bundled safely in his arms, Jinwoo headed across the floating field, Hawa trotting at his side and staring up at him like this was the best day ever. Elle hovered over the neat rows of soil and suddenly stiffened, spotting that the edge of the floating field was not where it used to be. Elle dashed across the dirt and cheered that the dungeon farmland had grown again, and far below the clouds the island now stretched wider, proof that Jinwoo's latest challenge had paid off. Riding the good mood, Jinwoo told the others to greet the horned rabbits, proudly calling them their newest family members. Elle leaned in with wide eyes at the horned rabbits, asking in a shaky voice if these cute, smiling things were really dungeon monsters. When Elle asked if they would be kept as pets, Jinwoo pressed a finger to his lips and calmly said they were actually livestock, even as Hawa giggled and played with them like new friends. Jinwoo just smiled to himself, already balancing the thought of caring for them with the hard fact that this was still a working farm. Looking over the empty rows, Jinwoo asked the horned rabbits where they wanted their home, and the pair at his feet twitched in surprise at the idea of getting a house of their own. Jinwoo said that since he had brought them here, the least he could do was give them food and a roof. And the father rabbit burst into grateful tears at being treated like more than just a beast. Soon Elle was laughing and telling Hawa to enjoy this gift while she could, and the little girl spun around the field with the horned rabbits, their happy cries echoing while Jinwoo watched his strange new family settle in. Jinwoo watched the happy rabbits and with a tiny sweat drop, reminded himself that sooner or later he would have to treat them as livestock, not just cuddly guests. The farmer leaned down with a friendly smile and asked the horned rabbit how it usually lived, and the little creature perked up and answered with a sharp cry. The horned rabbits explained that they used to curl up in holes they dug themselves or hide in bushes, and Jinwoo realized their lives really were not that different from normal rabbits. He paused, thinking over their answer, and then his eyes lit up as a new idea for their home snapped into place. Hawa threw her arms up with a huge grin, and a bunch of chubby ground spirits popped out around her, ready to answer her call. Facing the lined-up spirits, Jinwoo calmly asked them to stack stones into a tower taller than he was, turning their farm work power toward building for once. As the little spirits got to work, Jinwoo remembered hunter files that showed earth spirits hurling giant spikes in battle, and he mused that while he had only used them for field work so far, their true power was meant for things like that. Instead of some grand rock tower bursting out of the ground, the tiny spirits waddled around, carefully piling stones one by one, and Jinwoo stared, wondering why this looked so different from the dramatic battles he had seen. Seeing the spirits sagging and steaming with effort beside the lumpy stone heap, Jinwoo quickly told them to stop and apologized for forcing them to do something that clearly was not their thing. Later, one horned rabbit stood alone in front of the squat stone mound, silently sizing up the plain little structure that was supposed to become its new home. One horned rabbit suddenly let out a loud cry, fired up to build its own house from scratch. The little builder dove headfirst into the mound, kicking up dirt, and Jinwoo winced as the loose soil started sliding down toward the rabbit's back. With the rabbit stuck and dazed in the dirt, Jinwoo knelt beside it and calmly said the problem was simple and fixable. The farmer pressed the top of the mound flat and firm, then carefully opened a tunnel, explaining that packing the roof first would keep their new home from caving in. Once the mound looked solid, Jinwoo brushed off the dirt and patted the rabbit's head like it was nothing, while Hawa lit up, eager to join in. Hawa sprinted over with a bright grin, ready to throw herself into patting duty like it was the best game ever. She jumped right onto the rabbit's back and started pounding away with both hands, laughing as the poor thing squeaked that this kind of patting really hurt. Jinwoo hurriedly told Hawa to ease up and, a bit embarrassed, added that he wanted another turn himself, while Elle floated closer and shyly asked if she could try patting as well. The tiny dungeon spirit looked up at him with wide eyes, asking if she could pet the rabbit too, and Jinwoo slowly agreed but stressed that she had to be very gentle. Soon Hawa and Elle were kneeling together, slowly running their hands over the rabbit's soft fur, and the little guy stretched out with a blissful face while both girls sighed at how nice the gentle touch felt. Jinwoo just sat there with a soft smile, feeling like his heart had been washed clean by the kids and the rabbits. As he stared at the rough ground, the farmer wondered if he should bother a stronger spirit just to build a rabbit cage. The mighty ground spirit loomed over him, clearly offended that he would even think about using her to build a simple rabbit cage, and Jinwoo quickly tried to walk back the idea. In the end, a plain wooden rabbit hutch did the job just fine, and Hawa and the other girl grinned as the horned rabbit stretched out on the fresh hay like they had always lived there. Later, while Jinwoo was eating with Hawa, the easy mood snapped as a serious report came on, making his hand freeze halfway to his mouth. On the screen, the news anchor calmly explained that a strange side effect had been found in the beauty-based hair treatment, turning the once miracle product into a problem. Jinwoo stared at the screen, sweating as the anchor went on about tailbones growing out and the company pulling every hairy hair product off the shelves. Not long after, his boot pressed into the dry path as he trudged out of the house, the news still pounding in his head. Outside, Hawa skipped along, proudly waving a beauty leaf in the air, while Jinwoo walked beside her with a long sigh, too drained by the news to match her energy. Staring up at the clear sky, Jinwoo wondered why a side effect had suddenly shown up now, and what he was supposed to do with all the beauty he had already grown when it had seemed perfectly safe before. Hawa tilted her head up at him, worried, and asked if howling was really alright after all that talk about the bad side effects. Jinwoo forced a smile, told Hawa not to fuss, and said they should go check on the dungeon farmland since Elle was waiting. A portal of light opened, and the farmer stepped out with Hawa at his side, only to fall quiet when he spotted the small figure in front of them. Instead of the calm manager he expected, Elle hovered in front of them, folded in a deep bow so low her face nearly hit the ground, making Jinwoo stare in silence while Hawa softly called out to howling again. Jinwoo jumped, demanding to know what she was doing bowing like that, but Elle only spun in the air, babbling out a frantic apology as if she had ruined everything. The farmer lunged forward and caught her tiny body before she could spin off again, sweat running down his cheek as he begged her to calm down and just tell him what had happened. Elle's red eyes filled with tears as she stammered that she had messed up badly, her voice breaking between little sniffs. She finally blurted out that she had pulled a single leaf from the beauty crop, and in his mind Jinwoo pictured her cheerfully tugging it free from the glowing vine, his stomach dropping as he remembered the news report. Jinwoo froze for a heartbeat, then forced out a crooked smile, clearly trying to swallow his own fear before it scared her even more. He reached out and rubbed her head with a soft grin, telling Elle he had thought something truly awful had happened, and that a single leaf was nothing to cry over, even as tears still clung to her cheeks. Then he added that they would probably have to drop the whole beauty crop regardless, and Elle's eyes went huge as she shot upright, stunned that he was even thinking about giving up such a miracle plant. Elle keeps sobbing, blurting out that the leaf is not the real issue, and that something much worse has happened. Jinwoo waves his finger and tells Elle about the report he saw that morning, and her face twists in horror as she wonders how things could have gone that wrong. The farmer laughs it off, saying that pulling one leaf is the kind of slip he could make himself and not something worth getting mad over. Hearing that, Elle wipes her eyes and beams, calling Jinwoo a real angel for forgiving her so easily. With the matter settled, Jinwoo suggests they go see how the horned rabbits are doing, and both Hawa and Elle perk up and hurry along with him. One of the horned rabbits bounces into view, so puffed up with fur it looks like a giant cotton ball, while Hawa's name is shouted in alarm. The farming spirit flutters beside the swollen rabbit, and happily explains that she gave it a beauty leaf, while the little girl Hawa gushes over how cute it is, and Jinwoo just stands there in stunned silence. Jinwoo's face goes flat and pale as he realizes they have been feeding a priceless, dangerous crop to a rabbit like it was a snack. The horned rabbit just sits there with a calm, smug look, its fur shining like a polished cloud, making it clear the beauty leaf worked a little too well. The clean-cut office worker smiles at the sky, his hair looking thick and perfect, like the ideal model for a miracle hair product. A sudden gust tugs at the top of his head, and the glossy hair starts peeling away from his scalp. His wig sails into the sky, leaving his shiny head bare as he yells in shock, while the ad proudly declares that the age of fake hair is over. A few tiny hairs poke out from his smooth scalp, sparkling like little sprouts, and the once panicked man now looks up in quiet surprise. Moments later, his hair has grown into a long, glossy mane, and he throws his head back, laughing like his whole life just turned around. Now bursting with confidence, the man holds up a huge jar of hairy hair and gives a thumbs up, promising that this magic cream will let anyone feel proud of their own hair. Out on the farm, Jinwoo stares blankly at the sky, a bead of sweat on his cheek as he remembers how he used to laugh at that over-the-top hair ad. Standing with Hua and the puffed-up rabbit, the farmer now has to admit that what he once saw as pure ad nonsense might actually be real on his land. And Hua bury their hands in the rabbit's cloud-like fur, laughing in awe at how insanely soft and fluffy it is now. Elle's smile fades as she glances back toward the farmer, puzzled by his uneasy tone and asking what has him so worried. Jinwoo forces a shaky smile and asks Elle if she gave the horned rabbit one of the beauty leaves, sweat already running down his face. Elle lights up, clasps her hands, and cheerfully admits that she did exactly that, as if she expects praise. The dungeon spirit strokes the rabbit's puffed-up head and explains that she gave it the beauty leaf she had picked by mistake, happily adding that the little guy loved every bite. The horned rabbit bounces with joy, loudly bragging about how delicious the leaf was, while Jinwoo just stares down at it in stunned silence. The farmer forces a gentle smile, thinking that feeding the untested crop to livestock is a much bigger problem than simply picking it. He tells Elle that looking after the horned rabbit like this is kind, and that he knows she meant well. Then the farmer gently but firmly explains that she must never feed a horned rabbit with any crop that has not been fully checked first, and asks her to be much more careful from now on. Elle hugs the fluffy rabbit tighter, her eyes shaking as she quietly asks if she really made a huge mistake. Jinwoo scratches his cheek and awkwardly reminds her that he had warned there could be strange side effects from beauty, which makes Elle's face freeze as the risk finally hits her. Overwhelmed, Elle throws herself into a frantic bow in front of him, shouting that she is terribly sorry, while Jinwoo waves his hands in a panic, insisting she did not know about the side effects. Jinwoo leans in, sweat running down his cheek as he nervously adds that there is one more thing they need to talk about. He lets out a long breath, trying to calm his racing heart. The farmer slowly raises his hand, choosing to comfort Elle rather than push her harder. With a strained smile, Jinwoo grips the dungeon spirit's shoulders and says it is okay this time, but she must make sure nothing like this ever happens again. Elle sniffles, eyes still wet, and promises in a small voice that she will never let something like this happen again. Jinwoo's smile softens for real now, glad that she understood and agreed. When Jinwoo turns to check on the horned rabbit again, both he and Elle pause, puzzled by what they see in front of them. Hua beams with joy as she hugs the swollen horned rabbit like a plush toy, completely unaware that her grip is way too strong. The horned rabbit gasps and flails in her arms, clearly unable to breathe and begging for help. Leaning down with a nervous smile, Jinwoo asks Hua to loosen her hold so he can speak with the rabbit, while the fluffy victim keeps crying out in her arms. Hua lights up at the farmer's request, hugging the horned rabbit tight as she gets ready to go play with its kids. Hua sprints toward the hutch, yelling happily, while Jinwoo holds the dazed horned rabbit, which quietly thanks the heavens for still being alive. Jinwoo gently tells Elle she should go play too, but the dungeon spirit hugs herself and says she is fine, clearly still bothered by what happened before, which he notices. The farmer uses the rabbit's soft paw to pat Elle's head and tells her that since she has learned from it, everything is fine now, even as she starts to protest again. Jinwoo glances up with a strained smile, thinking hard about what to do with a spirit who is taking his scolding this seriously. When he asks if her promise to reflect was just empty talk, Elle panics and rushes to say she truly meant it, eyes wide with worry. Satisfied, Jinwoo declares the matter settled and waves her off, telling her to go play with Hua instead of moping. Elle's tense face softens into a shaky smile as she answers that she will, clearly relieved. Letting out a small breath, Elle dashes over to Hua by the hutch and shyly asks if she can pet the baby rabbits too, while Jinwoo smiles at the sight from behind. As the girls play nearby, Jinwoo asks the horned rabbit if all that extra fur feels bad, and the poor thing admits it is a little uncomfortable. Hearing the rabbit's complaint, Jinwoo brightens and offers to trim all that extra fluff for it. The horned rabbit trembles in his grip, staring up at his intense smile and begging him not to do anything scary. The farmer grabs a sharp sickle with a wild glint in his eye, warning the rabbit to stay still or risk its ears along with the fur. The sickle's edge shines coldly in the air, making the simple haircut feel like a life or death mission for the poor rabbit. Jinwoo swings the sickle with shocking speed, and the horned rabbit thrashes and cries for someone to save it as clouds of fur explode around them. When the last clump drops, the once-round puffball is left lean and bare, screaming that its perfect fluff is completely ruined. Kneeling beside the trimmed rabbit, Jinwoo studies its body and mutters that, aside from the crazy fur, beauty does not seem to have caused any strange side effects. His eyes widen as he finally catches something odd that he somehow missed until now. He stares at the horned rabbit and points out that the horn which used to be snapped off is now pushing out strong and whole again, leaving the rabbit confused by his words. Light glints off the fully grown horn, proving that the beauty leaf did far more than just puff up its fur. The horned rabbit throws its ears wide and yells in shock, as it finally notices the solid horn sticking proudly from its head. The horned rabbit leaps onto Jinwoo's lap, babbling that its horn, the rare prize every hunter dreams of, has somehow grown back. Staring up at the sky, the horned rabbit keeps crying out that it has never heard of a horn like this growing back, not even in rumors. Jinwoo jerks forward with a sharp cry as a worrying thought flashes through his mind. On the TV, the news anchor reports that beauty products are causing a nasty side effect, with people's tailbones forcing their way outside their bodies. Elle remembers handing the horned rabbit the beauty leaf she had plucked by accident, smiling as she recalls how much the little guy adored eating it. His mind races to a simple thought. If he keeps growing beauty and keeps raising horned rabbits like this, something huge might be possible. In his head, Jinwoo stands under a bright sky as rabbit horns and cash pour down, picturing a future where he can churn out horned rabbit horns like a factory and swim in money. A slow, crooked smile curls on Jinwoo's lips as he starts to accept that this crazy idea might actually work. Jinwoo glances toward Hwa, L, and the horned rabbits by the hutch, already weighing how this little pet pen could become the start of something huge. Hwa and L just sit there laughing, cuddling the tiny horned rabbits like they are the best toys in the world. Watching them, it is clear this little pen is more than livestock to them. Jinwoo thinks back to Hwa clutching the rabbit and begging him to keep it safe. He realizes that her simple wish is what stopped him from giving up on the poor thing. Then he remembers Elle, who had nervously fed the rabbit a beauty leaf, thinking she had messed everything up. Now that same mistake suddenly looks like the key to something huge. Staring at the rows of beauty swaying in the field, Jinwoo feels a wild thought hit him. Because of Hwa, Elle, and that news report, maybe he does not have to abandon this crop at all. The farmer's lips slowly curl up as the idea settles in. The beauty field he was ready to erase might become his greatest chance yet. Bursting with relief, Jinwoo sweeps Hwa and Elle into a tight hug, almost knocking them over. He cheers that Hwa has given them hope again, and both girls squeal with joy at his sudden attack of affection. Held tight in his arms, Hwa and Elle relax and giggle that his cuddles tickle. For a moment, the crazy plans and dangerous crops fade, and they just feel like a happy little family. Out by the hutch, the horned rabbit strikes a proud pose in front of a mirror, its new horn gleaming in the sun. It looks completely pleased with itself, as if this strange change is the best glow-up it could have asked for. The floating farm drifted quietly above the clouds, rows of empty soil waiting beside the shining beauty field. For a second, everything looked peaceful, like the chaos from earlier had never happened. Inside the house, Jinwoo sat facing the bright sky when Hwa and the horned rabbit suddenly charged toward him, full of energy. Whatever peace he had was clearly over. Jinwoo's eyes widened as he finally got a clear look at the rabbit. The little ball of fluff bounced proudly, its new horn gleaming like it had just won the lottery. Bright window from the system flashed up, praising how well he had grown beauty and turning it into a special challenge. It ordered him to process the crop to block its side effects, promising a real gift if he succeeded and only a half-hearted cheer if he failed, even hinting that a true expert should handle work this tricky. Jinwoo rubbed the back of his head, already feeling a headache as he grumbled that this quest had popped up right when he was finally starting to relax. His face tightened as he thought about how this new task stacked on top of everything else he already had to handle. On the table, the beauty leaf and dark fruit glowed under twin status windows, each marked as S rank, one promising a huge jump in stamina and magic, the other only slightly less. Both came with the same blunt warning from the system. Use them only once and never eat them raw unless he wanted nasty side effects. Bathed in a greedy golden glow, the farmer reached toward the shining beauty, wondering if he could really mess with something this broken and wishing it came without any strings attached. Jinwoo dropped into his chair and groaned that the system wanted a professional, but he had zero connections and no idea how to process anything. As he griped about what kind of expert he was even supposed to find, a faint shine from the green device on his desk nudged at his thoughts. His eyes sharpened as a thought finally clicked. The green gadget on the table gleamed back at him, pointing straight toward the one professional who might actually handle beauty. Hwa stared up at the sky, watching a thick line of smoke twist upward like something had already gone a bit wrong. Jinwoo knelt by the little campfire with the beauty clamped in his tongs, telling Hwa to think of it like simple cooking instead of some grand ritual as the spirit and rabbit watched. A bright window from the system popped up, calling it Beauty X rank and warning that its side effects were now fully pushed, bluntly telling him to just burn the thing all the way through. Jinwoo frowned at the charred ball, thinking that if roasting it over a campfire could really fix beauty, the nasty side effects would have vanished long ago. Still, the farmer let out a tired breath and decided he might as well keep going now that he had started. Jinwoo burst into motion, rushing around with wild energy to test every idea he could think of, while Hwa and the little spirit hugged the rabbit and watched him nervously. Before long, his trials filled the table with strange results. From a bowl of mashed beauty to a whole jar of pickled beauty that looked more like pricey snacks than miracle medicine. Jinwoo stared at the jar in his hands, sweating as he saw that even mashed and pickled beauty did nothing to tame the side effects, which just made the waste hurt even more. Sitting there with the rabbit at his feet, Jinwoo noticed Hwa and the spirit both staring over his head and asked if something up there was supposed to help them. The farmer turned, eyes sharpening as he decided to stop burning through rare crops and leave beauty alone until a real, decisive hint showed him what to do next. Jinwoo pushed the failed beauty tests out of his mind and said he would go back to what he planned first, leaning over the edge with Hwa and the spirit to look down at Kyung. The horned rabbit tilted its head, puzzled as Jinwoo called it closer and wondered when its fur had puffed up this much again. The farmer sat down at Kyung's level, telling the little ball of fluff he only wanted to see how well its horn had grown back. When he lifted Kyung into his arms, Jinwoo grinned and praised the horn, saying it had grown perfectly and was the best one yet. And the rabbit puffed up with pride. Then with the same bright smile, Jinwoo pinched the tip of the horn and calmly said it was time to cut it off, his gentle tone not matching the words at all. Kyung exploded into wild kicks and wails, protesting that this was not what it had agreed to and demanding how it was supposed to trust him like this. Trying to calm the situation in his own way, Jinwoo asked Hwa to call the wind spirit, and the little girl hurried to answer, clutching the glowing green spirit in her hands. With the wind spirit perched on his shoulder, Jinwoo told Kyung they would numb it first so it would not feel a thing, but the poor rabbit only sweated harder, letting out scared cries. Left on the ground under Jinwoo's looming shadow, Kyung shook like a leaf, eyes blank with fear even as someone called its name softly. The name Kyung rang out in a sharp cry, cutting through the tense air as the tiny rabbit braced for whatever the farmer was about to do. Kyung bawled on the ground, acting like the whole world had ended over that missing horn, while the farmer just stood there in awkward silence, not even turning around. Jinwoo stared at his shaking hand, suddenly nervous about what kind of value this tiny horn might hold. The system announced that Kyung's horn was a male horned rabbit's shining horn, a plus rank, grown perfectly and packed with magic. The kind of piece alchemists and jewelers would fight over. The farmer swallowed hard, admitting to himself that while a plus was amazing, it was not some one-of-a-kind miracle item. Then a wild thought hit him, and his eyes lit up as he stared at his hand. He clenched his fist, deciding right there that he would mass-produce these horns. In his head, he was already soaking in a tub full of cash, drink in hand, picturing the mountain of money he would make by selling every last horn. Jinwoo jerked back to reality, startled as someone called out Hawa's name nearby. The farmer leaned over with a worried look, trying to see what Hawa and Kyung were doing now. Hawa dropped to her knees and hugged Kyung like a baby, whining that she was heartbroken too as the fluffy rabbit wailed into her arms. Hawa looks up with a soft smile, still cuddling the fluffy rabbit like she is trying to calm him down. Her small hand moves slowly over Kyung's back, letting him cry it out against her chest. The horned rabbit's body shakes, tears spilling out as he lets one last sob escape. Wu bends down beside them, staring at Hawa in surprise as he realizes she was the one who calmed the horned rabbit down. Hawa twists around with a huge grin, answering his call like nothing is wrong at all. She keeps patting Kyung's soft head, and the rabbit finally relaxes under her touch. The farmer falls quiet, unable to say anything as he watches the two of them. Standing with his back to them, the farmer admits he had been blinded by money and wonders how he could have treated Kyung like that. Hawa tilts her head and looks up at Jinwoo, confused by how quiet and distant he suddenly feels. The farmer rests his hand on Hawa's head with a gentle smile, thanking her for taking care of Kyung in the way he should have from the start. Jinwoo lets out a small, sheepish smile as it hits him that he had forgotten the basics. He decides he needs to stay thankful and treat the ones by his side with real care from now on. Jinwoo bows his head and apologizes, gently rubbing Kyung's fluffy back while Hawa keeps patting his head. Kyung sniffles that he will be fine and that the horn will grow back, and the tight knot in Jinwoo's chest finally loosens as he feels himself grow a little more as a real farmer. Far away, a chef stares at a spirit newspaper that praises their best dish made with a plus-ranked corn, then picks up a ringing phone with a nervous greeting. The chef's stuffed backpack rests by the station bench, showing that they have already packed up their life and are ready to walk away from everything they built. The chef lowers the phone with a short farewell, feeling the weight of the choice settle in as the line goes dead. System window lays out the chef's harsh trial, praising them for giving up their own restaurant and seeking out the master who grew the ranked corn, and promises a gift from the forgotten maximum chef if they can gain true enlightenment. Sitting on the cold bench, the chef grips the phone and thinks about the massive fee for breaking their contract, then brushes it off, believing it is nothing if they can learn to get more of that miracle corn. The chef lets out a shaky grin, wipes away their nerves, and tells themselves it is time to go. With one smooth motion, the chef slings the heavy backpack over their shoulder and heads into the quiet station, leaving their safe, famous kitchen in the past. The chef strides forward with a firm look, deciding that the first thing they must do is track down the master who raised those ranked corns, taking their own first step toward real growth just like the farmer once did. Bands of hunters stroll out of the gate grinning, weapons on their shoulders, already counting the money they will make from the next run. Inside, horned rabbits glare with bright red eyes, looking fierce even though everyone knows this dungeon is one of the safest and cheapest to clear. Out in front of the dungeon, a loud vendor calls people over, bragging about the best prices on horned rabbit horns and cute decorations made from them. Gaping purple gate in the middle of the field, plus all the money that flows around it, is more than enough to pull in a steady crowd. At one stall, the seller carefully hands over a box packed with trimmed horns, sealing another small deal. Jinwoo glances at his phone and sees 200,000 won hit his account, figuring that is pretty decent for a bunch of low-rated horns, and promising the vendor they will haggle again later. He pats his pocket, glad the smaller pieces move so well, yet a bit bothered that one big item is still stuck with him. In his hand, the irradiated horn he failed to sell glows so bright that light seeps through the cloth, making him wish he had found a way to get rid of it too. He thinks back to that day in the dungeon, when he lined up the horned rabbits and showed them the first trimmed horn, getting them ready for a full cutting job. With a sleepy rabbit on his lap and a tiny plant spirit hovering beside him, Jinwoo gently clips another horn, relieved that the whole trimming job is going smoothly thanks to how calmly the rabbits are letting him work. Jinwoo blinked at the numbers, not sure he had seen them right. The system marked one trimmed horn as a plus, while the rest barely reached mid-grades. He eyed the smug horned rabbit beside him and wondered if this one was just born different, deciding to watch it a bit longer. Later, Jinwoo told a buyer that he also had an A+ horn, and the man snapped to attention, stunned by what he had just heard. Word of the A+ horn spread in a flash, and a pack of buyers swarmed him, each waving cash and trying to outbid the others until the whole place turned into a noisy mess. Thinking back on that chaos, Jinwoo admitted he had failed to sell the A+ horn and decided he would just throw it on an auction site instead, Then he looked around and called for Hawa so they could finally head home. He turned to take her hand and froze when he saw the empty space where Hawa should have been. He spotted Hawa's tiny back already slipping into the busy crowd, even though he had told her to stick close because today was packed with people. Watching her vanish between legs, he sighed and thought this must be why parents buy loud squeaky shoes, picturing Hawa racing around like a runaway chick. He hurried over and grabbed her, voice shaking as he warned that wandering off could get her snatched by some scary stranger, while Hawa clung to his jacket and called out to him over and over. Jinwoo stopped mid-lecture as a rich smell hit his nose, and his eyes slowly widened in surprise. A moment later, both Jinwoo and Hawa just stood there drooling, their heads empty except for that mouth-watering smell. He followed the scent to a stall packed with people, wondering why everyone was just staring instead of actually buying anything. Jinwoo froze when he read that the amazing smell was coming from horned rabbit skewers, the same meat known for gross texture and a rotten stink that once made a famous hunter throw up. He guessed that story was why the crowd only watched from a distance, even though the grill smelled heavenly, while Hawa bounced at his side, begging to go get some. The farmer tried to talk her down, reminding her that it might taste truly awful, but Hawa only shouted louder that she still wanted a bite. Looking at her stubborn face and breathing out a small sigh, Jinwoo decided that food which smelled this good could not be that bad and that no one on earth could really stop Hawa anyway. With that, he scooped Hawa into his arms and marched toward the stall, while she threw her hands up and yelled her own name like a battle cry. On the grill, chunks of horned rabbit meat and green onions sizzled and smoked, sending out a smell strong enough to make anyone's stomach growl. A hand reached in, snatched up a finished skewer, and lifted it toward a waiting mouth for that risky first taste. The vendor dragged a thick brush through a bright red sauce and painted it over the meat, turning the simple skewers into something that looked dangerously good. The horned rabbit skewer sizzled in neat rows, the meat and onions browned just right and ready to be served. The vendor glanced over the grill and relaxed a little, feeling proud that the skewers had come out exactly the way they wanted. As the smell drifted out, the vendor reminded themselves that even if they wanted to rush to the farmer who grew those awaiting crops, they first needed to grind through a month of work to save up enough money. The cook stared at the ring of people hanging back, annoyed that even with lower prices and careful meat choices, the nasty name of horned rabbit still scared everyone off when they really needed just one brave first customer. Then Jinwoo walked up to the counter with Hawa in his arms and called out to the stall, making the vendor snap to attention with a quick, polite reply. The stall owner turned toward them, slipping into a practiced welcome as if this was just another normal customer. Father and child stopped in front of the small stall, Hawa almost bouncing out of Jinwoo's arms while the vendor faced them across the counter. The cook froze for a second, eyes widening as it hit them that someone had actually come to buy, and that the tiny girl in his arms looked almost too cute to be real. Jinwoo told the stall owner he was here for horned rabbit skewers and asked if they were doing all right, while Hawa stared at the grill with a little line of drool on her lip. Snapping out of it, the vendor confirmed the limit of 2 per person, took Jinwoo's order for 4 skewers, and hurriedly promised they would be ready in just a moment. The vendor's heart pounded as they stared at the father and his kid, suddenly feeling like they had just met someone meant for them. They grabbed at their vest, shocked at themselves and trying to shake off the thought, since this was a grown man holding his child. The vendor's gaze lingered as they admitted in their head that this was exactly the kind of person they usually fell for. Hawa suddenly leaned in with drool hanging from her mouth, startling the vendor out of their wild thoughts. The stall owner hurriedly praised how adorable Hawa was, while Jinwoo held her back and told her to wait her turn instead of jumping the counter. The vendor let out a quiet breath, scolding themselves for thinking nonsense when this father and daughter were clearly just excited for the food. With the meat cooked just right, the vendor wrapped a skewer and handed it over to Jinwoo. Then the stall owner held out another full skewer, insisting that, as their very first customer, Jinwoo should get a bonus, which left both him and Hawa wide-eyed. People in the back watched the whole thing with stunned faces, hearing Jinwoo call Hawa over and feeling their own curiosity about the skewers grow. Jinwoo and Hawa bit into the skewers at the same time, ready to find out if this risky horned rabbit meat was actually worth all the trouble. The first bite hits and both of them freeze, eyes shining like stars. Jinwoo blurts out that this cannot really be horned rabbit meat, while Hawa just keeps chewing in bliss. They lean in over the skewers, stuffing their mouths and talking with full cheeks. Jinwoo admits the taste and texture are so good he would believe it was the finest Korean beef. The two of them just stand there, faces melting with joy as the taste sinks in. Jinwoo admits the smell was nothing compared to actually biting into it, and Hawa happily echoes him in her own silly way. A line of hunters stares at the skewers with blank faces and dripping mouths, completely sold just by watching that reaction. Their feet slam into motion at once as they bolt toward the stall, not wanting to miss out. Jinwoo clutches Hawa as hunters shove in around them, waving cash and yelling that they each want skewers, some even calling for 2 at once. He can only stare back in shock as the quiet stall turns into a storm. Before he knows it, Jinwoo is standing aside with Hawa in his arms while a long line of hunters snakes back from the stall, all waiting their turn for the rabbit skewers. Now that everyone has seen how good it is, people hand over money without a second thought, and the stall keeps selling nonstop. Jinwoo notes that the rich smell alone is pulling hunters in, while Hawa happily chants her own little praise between bites. Jinwoo looks up as the stall owner leans out, clearly flustered yet grateful, and thanks him for bringing in such a crowd. He waves it off, answering that it was nothing special. With Hawa hugged close and skewers still in her grip, Jinwoo walks away from the busy stall. Behind them, the vendor peeks out from under their hat, watching the pair with soft eyes as the line of new customers keeps growing. As Jinwoo walks off with Hawa laughing in his arms, Su-chan watches their backs fade into the crowd, and assumes this is the last time he will ever see them. The vendor quietly turns back to his work, not realizing that the man and child who just walked away are actually the partner's fate picked out for him. Later, Jinwoo lifts Hawa up with a stern face, saying she needs to be punished for running around on her own, while she flails and tries to defend herself. A tiny chunk of land hangs alone in the bright sky, with 2 specks tumbling down from it, making his talk of punishment feel way more dramatic than it really is. Instead of worrying about scolding, Hawa just stares ahead with a blank face, a thin line of drool slipping from her mouth. A nearby spirit girl leans in, eyes wide and a bit nervous, and carefully calls out to Hawa to see what is going on with her. Hawa crouches in front of the horned rabbit with stars in her eyes and drool on her chin, while Jinwoo and the spirit stare in shock, wondering why she is looking at their fluffy helper like it is her next meal.